Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, August 14th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. Asa Winstanley is off this week. Excuse me. It's day 313 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We have an important show for you today. Coming up, we'll have a discussion with Hatem Abudayyeh, a spokesperson for the March on the DNC Coalition, which is working to mobilize tens of thousands of people in the streets of Chicago. Later on in the program, Jon Elmer will cover the latest resistance news with a focus on Khan Younis and the ongoing defense of Rafah. But first, here's a summary of some of the latest developments in Gaza and the West Bank, and we'll also share some reportage highlights from the Electronic Intifada's contributors there. Over the last week, Israel has attacked areas across the Gaza Strip, including Deir al-Balah, Nuseirat, Burej, and Maghazi refugee camp in the central area, as well as Khan Younis in the south and Gaza City in the north. Let's start there. In the El-Daraj neighborhood of Gaza City, as crowds of displaced people sheltering in the Tabayin school gathered for dawn prayer on Saturday morning, Israeli airstrikes bombed the school, killing more than 100 people. Our senior editor, Maureen Claire Murphy, reported that just days before the massacre, Israel issued evacuation orders in northern Gaza, instructing residents of areas including Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun to go to shelters in central Gaza City, the area that was targeted on Saturday. Many of those killed were shredded or burned beyond recognition, as documented in horrific video and photos of the carnage, images that we won't show here. Others who were present at the school remained unaccounted for after the massacre, Maureen writes. The civil defense spokesperson said that some 350 families were sheltering at Tabayin school when it was hit in strikes on the upper floor used to house displaced people and the lower floor that served as a mosque, adding that Israel had attacked 13 shelters since the beginning of August. Al Jazeera's Anas Al-Sharif filed this report for the agency on Sunday.
We're inside the Al-Tabeen school prayer room in the aftermath of the massacre perpetrated by the Israeli forces against innocent civilians who were simply offering dawn prayers. More than 100 Palestinians were killed and dozens more were injured. The school, where hundreds of Palestinians were sheltering, was targeted and hit by a number of missiles fired from Israeli warplanes. The extent of the damage is clearly visible. Blood splatters on the floor, pieces of cloth, even body parts, and people are still looking for the remains of their relatives.
I came running to search for my family. My father was killed and my brother's legs were both severed. I am proud my father and brother died as martyrs.
I am now on the upper level of the mosque. It was also targeted by an Israeli warplane. You can see the hole where the missile penetrated the roof on the lower level. Dozens of women were praying on the lower level and were killed and injured. These are some of the parts of the missiles fired from Israeli jets on innocent displaced civilians sheltering here in the school. Despite the danger, many families have returned to the school and the fact they have nowhere else to go.
My son is suffering from lung fibrosis. We hardly survived the attack. I carried my son and ran for our lives. By the time I got down, I saw hundreds of dead bodies, blown to pieces, even scattered outside the school building, body organs stuck on the walls, horrific scenes, beyond description, beyond reason. We have nowhere to go, so we returned to the school, where the most basic necessities of life are totally absent.
This is the scene at the Al-Tabeen school, where displaced Palestinians were sheltering and the Israeli military committed this massacre.
That was Anas Al-Sharif reporting on Sunday. CNN reported that, quote, at least one U.S.-manufactured precision-guided bomb was used in the strike on the school. Quote, footage of the aftermath filmed by CNN showed parts of an explosive device that Trevor Ball, a former U.S. Army explosive ordnance disposal technician, confirmed were from a GBU-39 small-diameter bomb, the American broadcaster added, noting that the munition is manufactured by Boeing. Israel claimed that it killed 19 operatives with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad during the attack and accused the resistance groups of using the school as a command center, repeating previous attempts to justify strikes on schools, hospitals, and other civilian targets. Maureen Claire Murphy writes. In a statement published on its Telegram channel, she adds, Hamas rejected Israel's claims, saying that no militants were at the Tabayin school and that its fighters are under strict orders to not congregate among civilians so as, quote, to spare them from Zionist targeting. Rami Abdu, director of Euromed Human Rights Monitor, said that some of the supposed Hamas and Islamic Jihad operatives that Israel claimed to have targeted at the school on Saturday had in fact been killed in other locations in previous days. The deadly attack destroying the bodies of dozens of Palestinians also came one day after the U.S. State Department announced that Washington would provide Israel $3.5 billion for additional U.S. weapons and military equipment, Maureen reports. Congress approved $14 billion in additional funding for Israel in April. For much read Maureen Claire Murphy's report, U.S. weapon used in Gaza City school massacre that killed 100 on electronicintifada.net. Al Jazeera's fact-checking unit, Sanad, further explored the details of Israel's attack on Tabayin school. Their investigation determined that the attack was, quote, deliberately timed to cause maximum casualties, with a large number of displaced people deliberately targeted. According to multiple reports and the spokesperson for the Civil Defense Corps in Gaza, bodies were ripped to pieces, making it impossible for grieving families to retrieve the remains of their loved ones. Instead, the doctors at Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, where the pieces of bodies were taken, quote, started collecting body parts in plastic bags and giving 70 kilograms of remains to the family of a martyr who has gone missing, according to Tarek Hajjaj, Mondo Weiss's correspondent in Gaza. Hassan Ahmad told Hajjaj and Mondo Weiss that he searched extensively for the body of his 6-year-old son Ali, and after hours of searching, he did not find a trace of him. He then went to the Baptist hospital to ask about his son or to find any part of his body so he could identify him and bury him. After a long search that did not yield any results, the doctors at the Baptist hospital gave him a plastic bag containing 18 kilograms of human remains and told him, "This is your son. Go and bury him." Quote, "I don't know if this is my son or not. I don't know what I'm carrying in this bag. They said he's my son, and I don't know anything, and I don't see anything of my son in this bag," Ahmed explained. Meanwhile, Anas Al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera reporter we just showed, said that he emotionally and physically collapsed when he reached the scene and started to work. He posted, quote, "My words stopped and I lost my strength and ability to express myself and talk when I reached the scene of the massacre. The limbs and blood were around us. The bodies were cut up on top of each other. Tell me what words and phrases can help any journalist describe this horrific picture. When I told you on air that it was an indescribable scene, I was truly helpless in front of this scene. How can we convey to you our extermination? I was tired and in pain from the amount of body parts and blood I saw today." 2 weeks after they assassinated Ibrahim al-Ghul and Rami al-Rifi, two Al Jazeera journalists, the Israeli military now appears to be targeting Anas al-Sharif. An Israeli military spokesperson accused him of lying and of having an affiliation with members of Hamas. Al Jazeera condemned the incitement against the reporter, saying, quote, "We hold the Israeli government fully responsible for Anas's safety and warn that this rhetoric signals an intention to target him, just as they did with Ismail al-Ghul and Rami al-Rifi, in a bid to conceal the truth of what is happening in Gaza." Israeli airstrikes in and around Deir al-Balah in central Gaza continued this week. Our contributor Abubaker Abed reported over the weekend that Israeli missile strikes killed 10 people, mostly women, on Friday. And on Tuesday, Mohammed Abu al-Qumsan, whose wife, a pharmacist, gave birth to twins just 3 days before, went to pick up birth certificates for the newborns. While he was out, Israel bombed the apartment, killing his babies, his wife, and her mother. They had been displaced from northern Gaza and were sheltering in Deir al-Balah. This video of Abu al-Qumsan learning of the murder of his family needs no translation. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza stated that the total number of infants who were born and have been killed since October 7th is now up to 115. Meanwhile, as Israel's evacuation orders continue to mass displace Palestinians seeking safety and refuge, including this week in the southern city of Khan Younis, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees has warned that the search for clean water in Gaza is adding to the displacement misery. Louise Wateridge of UNRWA stated, quote, "These people, they've lost absolutely everything. They don't seem to be carrying much at all. Children were dragging empty water canisters because that's one of the most precious items. Now, anything that you can put water in, it is one of your most precious valuables. They were carried mattresses, jerry cans, and empty water cans, and not much else, because people can only really carry what they can in their hands." The UNRWA communications officer explained that families continue to seek shelter in parts of Deir al-Balah in central Gaza and in western Khan Younis further south. The United Nations reported this week that, quote, "The cumulative impact of humanitarian aid access constraints is perpetuating a continued cycle of deprivation and distress among affected people. Since August 1st, about a third of aid missions within Gaza were denied access by Israeli authorities," the UN added. The World Food Programme said that 21 of its food distribution points have been closed under the evacuation orders since the beginning of the month. Last week, the Norwegian Refugee Council reported that it had been unable to transport aid from crossing points to its warehouses in Gaza for 3 months, with an estimated 488 pallets of aid, for which the group is the consignee, stranded at Kerem Shalom crossing. This week, we'll highlight 2 recent features published by our writers in Gaza, focusing on the testimony of Palestinians who were tortured in Israeli detention. On July 29th, in an article titled "Man Caring for Mother with Alzheimer's Sent to Torture Camp," Fida al-Kedra reported on the experience of 3 recently released detainees, including Iyad Awad, who was abducted from his home in Jabalia, northern Gaza, where he had remained with his mother, who had Alzheimer's disease. Quote, "I told them that my mother needed someone to take care of her," Iyad said. "A soldier told me that he would bring me back to her. After hours of being away from his mother, Iyad walked a few steps. The Israelis shot him in the side of his body. He was taken to hospital where he underwent surgery. Following the operation, Iyad was brought to Sideh Teiman, a military camp in the Nakab Desert. The conditions there were unsanitary. Quote, "There were more than 30 of us using one bathroom that was only cleaned once a week," he said. "During approximately 70 days of detention, I could not shower, cut my nails, or change my clothes. Despite having been wounded, Iyad did not receive any medical care in the military camp. Apart from paracetamol, he was not given any medicine. When Iyad was eventually released, he learned that his mother had been left to die." The neighbors found her dead on the bed, he said, after Israeli troops had withdrawn from Jabalia. As they had been unable to make contact with him, other members of Iyad's family had assumed he had been killed. Quote, "They were surprised when I got out of prison that I was alive," he said. And on August 8th, in an article titled 18 Days in Israeli Prison, Shahad Ali reported on the horrific torture her 20-year-old cousin Nayef endured after he was abducted during Israel's invasion of his Gaza City neighborhood in December. Nayef, who had been shot in the foot during the incursion, and other men were taken to a prison in an unknown location. Shahad writes, When he arrived, he asked to see a doctor due to his foot injury, but they refused. He was beaten repeatedly, and he saw many other people being beaten. The food they provided was meager: bread, a slice of cucumber, a slice of tomato. Even water was not freely given. He said that when he asked one of the guards for water, they told him to open his mouth. He did so, thinking that the guard would pour water into his mouth, but instead the guard spat into his mouth and forced him to swallow it. The last 3 days in the prison were the worst, he said. The mental and physical torture reached unbearable levels. His whole body ached, and for the first time he wished he were dead. Every inch of his body was covered with cuts and bruises. Finally, after 18 days, he was released. He received treatment for his foot, and luckily the doctors did not have to amputate it. Quote, "The memory of my imprisonment will stay with me forever," he said. Read both Fida al-Qadra's and Shahad Ali's features on electronicintifada.net. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces rampaged through the cities of Ramallah and Al-Bireh in pre-dawn raids on Tuesday. One Palestinian man, Mu'attaz Sarsour, died after being shot by Israeli soldiers. Others were shot and injured, and a man was run over by an Israeli military vehicle in Amari refugee camp. Israeli forces stormed the areas to locate and demolish the homes of Palestinian prisoners, according to local media and Al Jazeera. At least 20 Palestinians were arrested and detained during the raids, according to the Palestinian Prisoners Society, including a child and several former prisoners, and soldiers broke into the homes and vandalized them. The Palestinian news agency Rafah reported that Israeli forces raided 2 residential buildings in the cities of Ramallah and El-Bireh and then blew them up. On Monday, Tarek Daoud, an 18-year-old Palestinian youth, was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers in Azun near Qalqilia. And Wafa news agency reported that Shadi Wissam Shahada, 17 years old, was shot by Israeli forces in the Jerusalem area town of Anata while he was working at his privately owned car wash shop in the area. He died of his wounds later in the day. Local sources said that the occupation snipers inside the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 settlement colony opened fire at the young man for allegedly throwing stones at the occupation soldiers from behind the separation wall. Other raids and arrests were reported in Nablus, Haris, the Arub refugee camp, Salfit, Na'alin, and Talfit over the last several days. This week, Defense for Children International Palestine reported on a violent arrest that happened in June, carried out by Israeli forces against a 7-year-old Palestinian boy in the central occupied West Bank. Baha was on his way to a grocery store to buy sweets with his friends on the first day of Eid in mid-June in the Palestinian village of Al-Mughayr, northeast of Ramallah, when the boys came across Israeli forces carrying out arrests in the village. According to Defense for Children International Palestine, the boys allegedly threw some stones toward the heavily armored Israeli military vehicles, and Israeli soldiers proceeded to fire live ammunition toward them. Baha's friends fled, and Israeli forces began beating Baha and bound his hands behind his back with a plastic zip tie. Israeli forces placed Baha alongside 3 young Palestinian men in the back of a military vehicle and brought them to Al-Sahel, an area about 700 meters away that Israeli forces declared a closed military zone after October 7th. Quote, "The soldiers kept me there under the sun for almost 3 hours, Baha told DCIP. Then a soldier untied me and told me I could go home but should not throw stones at them again. I headed back to the house on foot, and my hands were hurting after being hit by the soldiers. By the time I had arrived home, my finger had swollen and my face had turned yellow because I was really scared and because of walking in the sun the whole time. I have not left the house since the incident because I am scared of the Israeli soldiers and I do not want to get arrested again. Baha, who is 7 years old, told DCIP. Our contributor Faiha Shalash in the occupied West Bank writes that Israel's demolition of Palestinian homes in the West Bank is escalating. Since October 7th, Israel has demolished nearly 400 homes in the West Bank, leading to the displacement of over 2,300 people, about half of them children. Up until August this year alone, Israel has already demolished or forced the demolition of a total of 923 Palestinian-owned structures in the West Bank, leading to the displacement of nearly 2,000 people. For more, read Faiha's feature, Home Demolitions Set to Further Escalate on electronicintifada.net. Finally, we wanted to bring you some images and videos from journalists and others in Gaza that highlight the resilience, joy, and determination of the Palestinian people. Our contributor Abubaker Abed posted this photo of his niece Aylul 308 days into the war. Residents of Shujaiya in eastern Gaza City are rebuilding their homes that have been destroyed by 10 months of Israeli bombardments, refusing to relocate to the south. A man tells the one filming in this video that, quote, "We want to live. We are people and we want to live." The man filming him asks if he's from Shujaiya, and the man in the house says, "We are from Shujaiya. We are rebuilding and striving to live again." The one filming then narrates the situation, saying that the man is returning to his home in Shujaiya despite the destruction in the area. A room that can provide some protection is better than a tent in the south, he says. Let's go to that video.
قاعدين وبنعمل زينجو وبدنا نسكن تاني برضه.
الله
والله يتنسوا بعين الله يعطيكم العافيه.
الله يعافيك يا رب. هنا احد المواطنين مع عائلته يعود الى منزله في حي شجاعية رغم الدمار الكبير الذي حل بالحي، الا ان بعض المواطنين يعني ما لم يجدوا امامهم سوى
And Gaza Sunbirds, the paracycling team, posted this video of one of their members, Abdullah Angar, and his little boy Karam on a trip to the beach. He says, in the midst of displacement, come with us to see Karam playing in the sea.
اليوم طبعا رحلتنا أنا وابني كرم على بحر قطاع غزة من وسط النزوح. تعالوا معنا لنشوف كرم وهو يلعب في بحر غزة.
Take me to the dark seas, a ship without a name, sailing to the middle of the sea. Waters deeper.
Thanks to Gaza Sunbirds for that video. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Just so much, and so much, it never gets easier. It's getting far worse for people in Gaza. Every day it's getting worse. And I just have to say, in the rest of the world, I worry about people getting used to genocide, and we've all been. Every story is devastating. Every incident is devastating. But the video of Muhammad Abu Qamsan, who just got those birth certificates for his newborn children, and think about every aspect of that. Think about what it meant to them, to Muhammad and to his wife, to be able to bring healthy children into the world under these circumstances. Twins. And then to go and get their birth certificates, and think about the workers at the government office who are still there to try to issue birth certificates, to give people a sense of normality, to continue with life. it's just unbearable. It's just unbearable. And to see little Karam on the beach, and you just remember, I mean, yeah, I just, it's shocking. It's shocking.
Yeah. There, I remember saying this years ago, but like, you think it can't get any worse, and then it gets worse, and somehow it gets worse every day, every hour. And well, this is what we can do, is to to highlight these stories and to to give them a platform. And we're also incredibly honored today to be talking to someone who's doing a lot of organizing against what you just saw here in the U.S. Do you want to introduce Hatem?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Nora. So just before we bring Hatem on, or as we do, let me remind people that next week, delegates will be gathering here in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention to formally anoint Vice President Kamala Harris as the party's nominee for President of the United States. They will be greeted by mass protests organized by the March on the DNC Coalition under the banner Stand with Palestine, End U.S. Aid to Israel. And the coalition's call to action accuses the U.S. ruling party of, quote, financing genocide in Palestine and war in multiple countries, continuing the mass incarceration of Black and brown people, deporting millions of immigrants, and neglecting campaign promises made to the oppressed communities who represent their voting base. And so, of course, now we have with us Hatem Abudayyeh, who is a spokesperson for the March on the DNC Coalition. Hatem is also a Chicagoan, and he is founder and current national chair of the U.S. Palestine Community Network, USPCN, which has been a leading force in organizing Palestinians and allies to protest U.S. support for the ongoing Israeli genocide of Gaza. And regular viewers will remember that we had Hatem on the live stream. I think it was at the end of November, and Hatem, we're very happy to have you back again today.
Thank you. I'm always honored to be here.
Thanks, Hatem. And Hatem, before we get into some of the sort of substance of the protests and the mobilization, I want to start with some of the breaking news around just the effort to organize this march next week, these marches actually, during the Democratic National Convention next week. The first march is scheduled for Monday, August 19th, and it's to be followed by marches on Wednesday and Thursday next week near the venue, the United Center, which is, of course, the big arena where the Chicago Bulls play on the west side of Chicago, for the sports fans out there. And so on Monday, so just 2 days ago, a federal judge in Chicago denied a motion by march organizers to use a longer parade route that would take them closer to the United Center. The organizers argued in their lawsuit against the city of Chicago that the shorter march route that's being imposed by city and federal authorities would violate the First Amendment rights of the protesters to have their views heard. And I also understand that until today, the city of Chicago has still not issued the permits for the marches. So Hatem, just briefly give us an update on that situation and what your response is to the judge's ruling on Monday.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is that, excuse me, organizing works. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Organizing works. So we put a lot of pressure on the city attorneys when they first denied our permits. They tried to bury us onto Columbus Drive, which is like 3.5-4 miles away from the United Center. We sort of, laughed at that immediately, rejected it immediately, and sued in federal court. It wasn't out of the kindness of the city attorney's hearts that they decided to put us within what we call sight and sound of the United Center. They did it because we put political pressure on them and because we sued them in federal court. So we won a part of this battle, and they had to offer us an alternate route that was within sight and sound. We will be marching in front of the United Center. The challenge, though, is that we have an expectation that there will be tens of thousands of people in Chicago next week protesting the DNC. And so their route is only a mile long. Our proposed route was more like 2.4 or 2.5 miles. And the challenge there is when we leave Union Park, a historic park on the west side also, and we do the 1 mile route, by the time folks get back to the park, there's going to be thousands of people there who haven't even left. And so, yes, you might have upheld the First Amendment rights of the people who get to walk in front of the building and are able to make the message known: stop US aid to Israel, stop the genocide, free Palestine. But what about the thousands who never leave the park? Their First Amendment rights are not upheld. That was our argument. We felt like it was a compelling one, but the judge ruled, and we're very disappointed in the ruling. Of course, she ruled that the city met the legal standard of sight and sound, and they were no longer violating the First Amendment the way they were when they first offered us to be 4 miles away. The other challenge, which is as large of a challenge, is that as of today, we've got $60,000 to $80,000 worth of contracts with sound and stage companies, portable toilet companies, all these things that you need to stage a mass protest in a park like we're trying to do next week. And those are all on hold because they haven't even given us the park permit that we applied for back in November. So we're supposed to hear from them today. Electronic Intifada might get a scoop if I get any messages in the next few minutes. But we're very, very hopeful that we get the permit for the park today so we could sign those contracts and we could at least be ready to be staged there. And then we'll deal with the political pressure that we will continue putting on for the next 5 days to try to get the longer route. It's not just in the best interest of the Coalition of March on the DNC or my organization, the United States Palestinian Community Network, or only the protesters. It's really in the best interest of the city, because one of the arguments as well is that if you force all those people into a shorter route, if you force them to make turns onto very narrow side streets in Chicago and not on the main thoroughfares, you get into a situation where protesters might see that there's an open street, an open area, they want to go through it. We asked the police directly, what will happen to those folks if they did that? What will happen to those folks if there's a log jam, a bottleneck, and they're frozen for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and they try to break out of it? Will they be subject to arrest? And the cops said, yes, ultimately they would be subject to arrest. And so we said, why do you want to put the city in that situation? Why do you want to put our protesters in that situation? And so it's in the best interest of everyone that they give us a longer route, despite the ruling of the judge.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit about the march on the DNC coalition itself, and how you've come to this point. The coalition is broad, but Palestine and the Palestinian community are playing a central role in it. Ending U.S. support for Israel is the headline demand of the coalition, but it's not the only one. Talk about the march on the DNC coalition and what these demands are.
Yeah. So Nora, we've known for a long time in this country what kind of support we have from different communities here. I was lucky to grow up in a family that had friends who were considered themselves Arab nationalists, but also internationalists. So I was I was exposed to the Puerto Rican independence movement and the Black liberation movement, the Native sovereignty movement, immigrant rights movements, all of these other social justice issues that are so important to all of us as well. And so we've always had their support. We have the support of the entire world. We've seen that in the last 10 months. We've seen that in the 2.5 decades that folks like Ali and I have been organizing, in the 6 decades that our mentors have been organizing. And so it's not surprising that when we came together with this 210 organizations, we might have as many as 250 that have joined the coalition by next Monday, that they understood the primacy of Palestine right now at this moment. But we also are going to be addressing those other issues: workers' rights, immigrant rights, Black liberation, stop police crimes, police accountability, LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, women's rights, workers' rights. All of those issues will be represented with beautiful posters and banners and speakers from our stage. And remember, USPCN is not a one-issue organization, and our community is not a one-issue community. The Coalition of March on the DNC was formed last April of 2023, the very day after they announced that the DNC was going to be in Chicago. And so we joined it before there was any genocide. And we were going to be a part of that protest because we believe in the goals and objectives of it. We believe in the political perspective of it, that the Democratic Party has taken for granted all of our communities for a long, long time, especially the Black community, Mexican community, other immigrant communities, and the Arab and Palestinians as well. So it is going to be a really beautiful, rich, broad coalition, number of protesters that will be there from all different physical abilities, all different immigration statuses, children and seniors. It's the reason we fought so hard for this permit, to make sure that everybody who feels like they want to make their message heard about Palestine, about any of these other issues, can do that, and they can be safe and secure doing that. And we provide that safety and security ourselves. We keep us safe is a slogan that comes from the Black liberation movement, and that's what we do. We're prepared for that. We have a robust security and marshals team. We have the greatest legal institution in the history of this country, the National Lawyers Guild, that are working with us shoulder to shoulder, that will be there monitoring the police to make sure that they don't violate our rights, and to be there to defend folks if there are any arrests. They've done that for 10 months, have not taken a penny, all pro bono work. All of these National Lawyers Guild taking on the cases of all these young people who have been arrested at the protests. It's incredible stuff, and Monday's going to be a sight to behold.
And Hatem, I mean, just context for people who, unlike us, are not Chicagoans. I think you have the accent to prove you're a Chicagoan, Hatem. But Chicago is the largest. The Chicago area, the greater Chicago area, is the largest Palestinian community in the United States, and certainly one of the largest outside Palestine. And people don't often know that, because they talk, there's a lot of knowledge, even around the world, that Michigan, the state of Michigan, is a major center for the Arab American community, which of course it is. But and of course, there are a lot of Palestinian Americans in Michigan, but it's actually Chicago where the largest concentration of Palestinians is. And it's really, there's a lot of energy in that. In terms
and it's also politically really the hub of the Palestinian community in the United States as well. Most of the national organizations have their national offices in Chicago. Most of the conferences that happen, yes, because it's centrally located, but also because of the size of the community. We think there's about 80,000 Palestinians in the greater Chicago area. There was an article published in November by National Public Radio, I believe, online, that really talked about that community. A lot of folks who our colleagues of Ali and me have done studies and research, have been able to count this community, because the census obviously doesn't count us very accurately, and studied it so well for so many years, including our mutual friend Louise Kankar, who's a professor at Marquette. And so yeah, I mean, there's a rich history. We're part of not only the social fabric of the Arab community broadly in this country, but really the social fabric of Chicago and Chicagoland. We dominate now in terms of population in the southwest suburbs, as opposed to Chicago proper. But USPCN and my day job at the Arab American Action Network, we still consider ourselves an urban organization, and I don't want to leave 63rd Street yet, Ali.
Yeah, well, and we're really getting down into the weeds of Chicago life here. Hatem, we have a lot more to talk about with you, including about the reaction of the Israel lobby. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris and how she's relating to the issue of Palestine. There are other things, but Hatem, we want to just actually pause. We may need to pause for a few minutes, because we're going to get a guest from Gaza who we've been trying to reach all morning, and the connections are so difficult. So we may just interrupt this interview for 5-10 minutes to take
No problem.
Someone from Gaza. So we'll keep going until we have them connected. But we were connected a few minutes ago, and we hope to reconnect. So, and I know you understand that, Hatem, just because of the difficulties. So until we know if that's going to happen, let me ask you, the Israel lobby is not taking too kindly to this organizing effort around the DNC. And we're seeing some of the usual smear tactics and scare tactics against community organizers. Some of the usual suspects, the Anti-Defamation League and other pro-Israel groups like the JUF, the Jewish United Fund of Chicago, which is a local Israel lobby group, but it's also one of the biggest nationally in terms of these city-based federations. And I know from my own experience how aggressive they have been. And they've been calling on police to crack down. You even received a threatening letter. I want to ask you about that, but it seems like we now do have Abubaker Abed from Gaza. So we're going to go to Abubaker, and Hatem, we're going to come back with you in a few minutes and get your answer on those issues. So
you got it.
All right, great. Thank you, Hatem. Abubaker. We're hoping to connect. You have a connection and then it drops. We're just going to see if this can work. We never want to turn down an opportunity to talk to Abubaker or to any of our colleagues in Gaza if we can. So we're going to see if we can get this to work.
Yeah. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers and readers of the Electronic Intifada have been worried about Abubaker with all of the attacks in Deir al-Balah over the last few weeks. And so hopefully.
Yeah, just the situation in central Gaza has been horrifying, and Abubaker has written about it. So I guess we'll see if we can get that connection going. But for now, let's go back to Hatem, and we'll come back to Abubaker if we're able to.
Yeah.
Hatem, talk about the attacks by the Israel lobby on this nationally significant, I would say internationally significant organizing effort to bring the demand to stop the genocide to the Democratic National Convention, and how you're responding to it.
Yeah, so we all know that the enemy works 24/7 as well as we do, and so especially in Chicago, the JUF is a very powerful organization. The Jewish United Fund, the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago, I believe it's called, and of course, the racist Zionist ADL, who we know because our partners in other communities, including folks from JVP, have done a lot of research about how they support anti-Arab, anti-Muslim organizations, how they attack the Black Liberation Movement for being in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. And in this case, they did a press conference last week, attacking the coalition to march on the DNC by name, attacking my organization, the United States Palestinian Community Network, by name, and saying that we were going to bring violence to the streets of Chicago with absolutely no evidence. Of course, they showed a bunch of videos of protests from other places, and they said that, you know, this is what's coming to Chicago. A level of fear mongering that, you know, we've seen from them a lot over the years, but really just absolutely disgusting. We got wind of the press conference the morning of, and so we put out our own statement about it, and we were able to, you know, really steal half their press that day. We went and we commented about their press conference, knowing what they were going to say, and refuting it on the spot, essentially, with a number of our spokespeople. So, you know, that was a really good hit for us. It was important to do that because we know why they do it. They are in the business of supporting war, supporting genocide, supporting the killing of 40,000 people and the injuring of 100,000 and the displacement of 2 million. And they don't have any shame in publicizing it. And so what they do is they try to criminalize the folks who are fighting to stop that war and stop that genocide. And the way they do it is that they weaponize anti-Semitism. You know, the JUF is claiming that they're putting out a report, or maybe they have already, and they're going to talk about the increase in anti-Semitic incidents. And all of our pro-Palestine activities and protests are going to be listed as examples of quote unquote anti-Semitic incidents, which is proof positive exactly what we're saying, that they're weaponizing anti-Semitism to try to criminalize us and criminalize our movement and fear monger in the community. One of the worst of them all, that the ADL and JUF supports, is an alderperson in Chicago, a member of the city council for those outside of Chicago. Her name is Deborah Silverstein, and she was in a meeting about the public safety committee in Chicago in front of the police superintendent, the top cop, as we say. And she said, should Jewish organizations and businesses shut down and leave the city next week? I mean, what kind of horrible, horrible racism is that? You know, to say that publicly like that. And so what happens in those situations is that you put a target on those organizers, you put a target on those organizations, you put a target on an entire community. Wadea El-Fayyoumi, the beautiful 6-year-old baby boy who was killed, stabbed 26 times and killed, was because of what was happening after October and the horrible, horrible narrative and rhetoric that we heard from the media, but also from a number of Democratic Party legislators, including our governor in Illinois, Pritzker, including Senator Duckworth, and including other congresspeople who were, you know, criminalizing our community, criminalizing the Palestinian resistance, criminalizing, you know, Palestine generally. And so the response from the racists and the white supremacists and the Zionists is to attack. And they killed Wadea. They shot those 3 young men in Vermont, the 20-year-old Palestinian young men in Vermont in November, only a month after the genocide began. And you know, they have been writing nasty emails and leaving nasty voicemails for a lot of us in this country for decades, of course. But nobody has ever come to my home. And there was a note that was left at my home, a threatening note in the foyer of my apartment building. And so, you know, we went public and said that the ADL and the JUF are responsible. They establish this atmosphere of fear mongering, and this is the result. the result is that they came to where I live. So we have to be very careful in the movement, always be secure, because the enemy has a lot of resources. But we're holding ADL and JUF responsible if anything happens to anybody in our community, anybody associated with the Coalition of March on a DNC or USPCN or anything. And again, we keep us safe, we protect ourselves and our community and our movement, and we will do that. But the ADL should be held responsible for this note, this hateful, threatening note. And that's the story of the attack from the Zionists.
And Hatem, I mean, I can only echo that, and we all have to be very aware and very careful. And I watched some of that press conference by the pro-Israel groups, and it was truly hateful incitement, smearing all of us collectively as terrorists, as terrorist sympathizers, extremists, as anti-Semites, and riling people up. I mean, race baiting and real incitement. But listening to you, Hatem, one thing that really strikes me, I don't know if you saw that 2 weeks ago we had the great historian Ilan Pappé on the live stream to talk about his new book, which is about the Israel lobby, the history of the Israel lobby, going back to the 19th century. And one of the key points that he makes in that book, and came out in our discussion, is how Israel and the Israel lobby has always been an elite project. And in the sense that even the early Zionists, like Theodor Herzl, when they went around Europe and they went to the union halls and to the Jewish communities to try and build support for Zionism, they couldn't. They were laughed out or told, get out of here. We're not interested in this. They got support from, governments, from people at the top. And if you look at the city of Chicago today, which is probably typical, I mean, it's sort of in a way representative, that's still how it is. The people are in the streets, and you have mobilized in demonstration after demonstration, tens of thousands of people in the streets of Chicago. And the Zionists simply cannot do that. They cannot mobilize people in the streets. They cannot mobilize a broad coalition such as you are part of. So all they can do is incite and try to rile up extremists on the fringe to raise tensions. They claim
Absolutely.
They're concerned about safety, but they're actually trying to incite tension, incite violence, so they can say, oh, look, we were right, and to incite a police crackdown. That is what they are doing.
Right. And the other thing that's interesting is we get a lot of questions about that. Are you worried about counter protesters and that sort of thing? And in all honesty, the local Chicago Coalition for Justice in Palestine, which is leading the protests on Wednesday next week, has organized almost 50 protests itself since October. Altogether, the institutions within that coalition and others, solidarity organizations, all told together, we've organized about 100 protests since October. And they ask about counter protesters. In Chicago, the racists that are here, the white supremacists are here, they don't try to protest in the Black liberation movement that comes out against police crimes and against police killings. They would never dare do that. And the Zionists and the racists and the white supremacists would never dare try to counter protest our mobilizations either, because like you said, Ali, they don't have the forces. They can't build the coalitions, and they realize that we've got tens of thousands that mobilize, and they have 8 octogenarians who are across the street with their Israeli and U.S. flags occasionally. So that's absolutely true. Again, we know we have the masses. on our side across the world. We definitely have the masses on our side in the United States. Every single poll that we've seen in the past probably 6 or 7 months, a couple months into the genocide, have talked about how the majority of the American public is saying stop the genocide. The one thing that we talk about all the time is the fact that Israel is finally being exposed, even in the United States, as the criminal pariah state that it is.
Hatem, hold that thought. We're going to come back and talk about Kamala Harris and some of the other issues, but we're going to try again to go to Abubaker in Gaza. He's backstage, and we're going to see if we can make this connection work again. Abubaker.
There he is.
There you are.
Hi.
Well, the very first thing before we talk about anything, there has been just now 1 minute before I connected with you, a couple of bombings around me. Just now, explosive, massively explosive, 2 bombings around here. Intense hovering of warplanes hovering also, and drones are heavily buzzing over our heads. That is the same scene that we have been talking about for more than 310 days. That's all I want to. That's just all I want to say at the beginning. And I'm very happy, always, to see you.
Alhamdulillah, salamtak na'iman. You have a beautiful new haircut.
Yeah.
And we're always happy to see you, Abubaker. And
thank you so much.
Your smile and your warm spirit are something that warms our hearts, but they're also in a way they don't reveal all the reality of what's going on, because over the past week or so, and even longer, the situation in Deir al-Balah and the central Gaza has been absolutely horrifying. Abubaker, we always pray for your safety, but the violence has been very close to you and to your family and your community. Tell us about what's happening, what has been happening. What should people outside Gaza know?
Well, as I've told you, that the normal scene, the usual update we've been all aware of, or the outside world has been well aware of, is that bombings continue, casualties continue, the death toll rises on a very daily basis. War wounded people also continue to rise. That is the normal update. So let's just talk about beyond these figures and beyond these usual scenes that people have been watching from their screens in peace and comfort over the past 300 days and more. Now, what we can tell you is that, unfortunately, starvation is still hitting the community. We can see that young children still queue up for some water, walk the streets long kilometers to get some liters of water, and it is not really well filtered. It is still in a way contaminated. The same thing, women. Where is the concept of a woman when a woman carries a bag of flour of more than 25 kilograms and takes it and carries it for 3 hours or so and walks for hundreds of kilometers to get it to their family? Then where are the word women to talk about the atrocities that our women are going through on a very daily basis? Also, at the same time, our neighbors, because my sister was the same thing. She was pregnant. My neighbor, she is pregnant, probably a 30-year-old pregnant woman. She is in her 9th month. I asked her last time and I told her that, what did you eat for today? And she preferred not to answer. But her answer then in the end was absolutely shocking, because what she said really broke my heart. What she eats daily, she is pregnant. She needs absolute complete care. There is I'm sorry to cut that off, but there's going to be another bombing right now. The sound is very clear in the sky, so I'm gonna hold on. I'm not gonna say anything, but this is the usual scene over the past weeks because it has been so intense.
Abubakar,
You will hear something
do
like
you
that.
need to move to a different location?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. I'm fine. But I'm just telling you that what is really going around me at the moment, because that has been the case over the past weeks. No, don't worry. Uh, this is our life in the end. So what she said was that we eat one single meal per day, and that is some stale bread. That is only some stale bread. She doesn't have any sort of sanitary conditions, good sanitary conditions, or any things, any facilities, any help that she can really deliver this baby very well. And she lives in a tent, and summer temperatures, range from 36 to 40. This is absolutely hell on earth. This is literally hell on earth. Just believe me. And regarding the bombings, there's been yesterday the naval bombardment across the Deir al-Balah Sea is absolutely insane. One fisherman, at least, who risked their lives to make a living, they don't have guns. They're not armed. They're just civilians. They're just very simple. They don't know anything about life except the sea and their boat. How on earth are they being gunned down? How on earth are they being killed on a very daily basis? At least one fisherman is killed per day by Israeli Navy. That is literally insane. Also, because we have been hearing very wildly about the news, about the story that went viral of Mohammed Abu Khamsan, whose twin baby has been killed. Already, how many times have I talked to you and talked to my or everywhere that the eastern outskirts of Deir al-Balah have been intensely bombed over the course of the past months. He was attacked the same way. An Israeli tank bomb has flattened his house, and it killed all of his entire family, including his twin baby. So there is a very, very, very intense ground, bombardment east of Deir al-Balah. There is at the same time a naval bombardment across the Deir al-Balah Sea. There is also insane level of bombardment and shelling across the south and different parts of Deir al-Balah at the same time, because there has been a variety of massacres. The videos and the records we've been filming and documenting and seeing and witnessing are absolutely beyond horrifying. I swear, I'm not really shy of saying this, but sometimes, and most of the time, the last time I remember I had a really, really good sleep, was probably like 2 months ago, because the last 2 months have been absolutely the most hellish.
What can you say about the status of people in the central area who have been displaced over and over and over again and have tried to find refuge in these central areas? What are the what's the situation inside shelters in these kind of western on the beach? Like what's the situation for people there?
It's really disastrous, beyond disastrous, because there is literally no shelter in central Gaza, because the northern parts of central Gaza, when we talk about Al Nusayrat refugee camp and Al Buraj refugee camp as well, both areas have been ordered to evacuate numerous times by the Israeli forces. And then these people come to Deir al-Balah, to the central part of Deir al-Balah, and then they don't find any places. It's just like Deir al-Balah is literally bursting at the seams. There is no single space empty for people to come, because tents are dotting along the streets. Tents are just like, people are literally canned in Deir al-Balah. How on earth, just like, you are talking about more than 1 million people now trapped in Deir al-Balah, because the southernmost areas of the Strip are invaded by the Israeli occupation forces, and then where should people go? If the most horrific idea that people have been really afraid of and frightened of is that what if Deir al-Balah is going to will be invaded or is invaded? Then where will we go? We should just be waiting for an inevitable death, because there's no safe place, there's no safe zone in Gaza. And yet, if Deir al-Balah is designated as a so-called safe zone by Israeli forces, then it is still not safe. We've already seen the horrific and the terrifying scenes coming out from Deir al-Balah, and the massacres unfolding across Deir al-Balah in particular, because literally, as far as I know, as I'm concerned, at least over the past 2 weeks per day, we lose 5 people and tens of injuries. So the death toll, particularly in Deir al-Balah, and that is a symptom of Israel's war on Gaza. That is a symptom of Israel's brutal assault in Gaza, and that is a symptom of the world's silence on the continued massacres by Israeli forces.
Abubakar, we are all, for month after month, week after week, talk of a ceasefire, talk of negotiations in Doha and Rome and Cairo. Hopes go up, then hopes are dashed. We get news that something is going to happen, and then it doesn't, and then the Israelis escalate their massacres. And once again now, we're waiting, what's going to happen in Doha on Thursday? Is Hamas going to take part? Are they not going to take part? Is the U.S. all this talk, and this is still going on? What I want to ask you, what I want to ask you, Abubakar, is what are people around you saying about this? Do they still have any? We all desperately want a ceasefire now, a stop to this genocide now. Are people still paying attention to what's happening outside, or have they given up?
Yeah, no, they haven't.
I don't mean given up. I mean given up on the negotiation.
Yeah. No, I understand. But look, the very first thing that I want to tell you, it's very easy to tally. If this war can end, it's just about one call from Biden. Call Netanyahu and tell him to stop the war seriously, and then the war ends. But what goes under the table between Netanyahu and the Tel Aviv government and the American government is what we are not aware of, is that America wants a war. America funds the genocide. America wants this war, because we've already seen that the weapons used by Israel in killing us and genociding us are really American made. So we are not saying, we're not literally like when Blinken goes up like appears in a conference and says that we are pressing for a ceasefire. We are intensifying our efforts to make sure that we are going to reach a deal very soon, an agreement for ceasefire very soon. Then he is lying, absolutely, because at the same time this news comes out, what really makes us, that's the point, Charlie, which is that what really makes us so sad is that at the same time, this kind of news goes out to us that we are pressing, that the U.S. government, the Qatari government, and the mediators are trying to press for a ceasefire to relax us of this barbarity and insanity. Then there's some news that the United States has renewed its sales to Israel, its weapons sales to Israel. That is literally disappointing. But again, believe me, what really, really makes us the most hopeful, what really, really lifts our spirits is your support, is your continued support. As long as we don't feel we are alone, then we still have hope. But once you give it up, because we're not going to give it up at all. We have belief in ourselves. We have belief that everything will be okay. We have believed that this is going to end. We're going to fight for our existence because it's all right. That's the essence of us. But if you really want to give it up, then we are going to be highly affected and badly affected by what is really going on. I told you one time, all the times, like 313 days. You probably would say that Abubaker would change in some tries. No, not at all. Still hopeful. I'm still smiling. I'm still so pleased to talk to you. I still know that your pressure, your protest, your boycotting, and all what you do is going to pay off in the end. And that's what is going to really happen in the end. Because I'm sure this is the essence of the good people who are living now on earth.
Abubaker, earlier during the news report, I showed a picture of the photo of your niece Aylul that you tweeted a few days ago. People are asking about her, about your other family members, and about your rose bushes. So give us some updates on your beautiful family and your garden.
Yes, her sparkling eyes. That's the most thing I've been hearing from people. Yes, she's been saying like sparkling eye, long eyelashes. Like from where did they come? No, I didn't create her. Astaghfirullah, but Allah has created her. I didn't know anything. But just about, yes, Aylul has really, prematured. She really understands things that other people don't understand, because the war has really taught us lots of things and lots of really, really, complicated and complex things. Because I learned whenever a rocket falls near, she says that I told her most of the time that, are you not afraid? And she says that the rocket is dumb, the rocket is stupid. So then you're saying, what is she literally saying? She's only 2. So that's the story. She cries, but she sobs, because that's the normal scene. She's a child in the end. We are afraid. We're panicked. She's panicked as well. A lot of people are panicked. My family is panicked whenever a rocket falls nearby. But then in the end, she and the other nieces and my other nieces and nephews really, really get panicked because of the level of explosiveness in such bombardments, because it's literally hell. It's very it's inconceivable. Like, I remember the last time, like yesterday, there was an attack on the sea, an airstrike on the sea area, and then it was like 10 p.m. our time, and then everybody was like, was terrorized by this horrendous attack. Then what could you expect for a child like this? Then they will cry, and they will really sob, because of this level of barbarity and insanity, because this level of barbarity is of the very, very highest order. We cannot see anything like that. And the moment that we see that things may stop and things may get easier, then another massacre happens. And I really wrote this for the Electronic Intifada, because I don't know why massacres always happen on Saturdays. We're talking about at least 8 massacres have happened on Saturday. The Saturday, the Khadija Girls School massacre. The Saturday, at School massacre. The Saturday, Al-Ahli Hospital massacre. The Saturday of October the 7th. The Saturday of Jabalia massacre. Then all of this has just happened on Saturday. What is wrong with Saturday? I'm too frightened, intimidated by really Saturday. Saturday is going to be 3 days later. What is really going to happen 3 days later? We really, really, the thing that I want to tell you is that we really, really thankful that every day we wake up, because we really, at the end of the day, we just say that we're lucky if we really wake up the next day. If we don't, then we have no other choice, because this has been the story. I honestly had a dream. My family had a dream. We had a dream that we have survived this genocide, and the happiness that really, smeared the faces, the covered of faces, was really unmatched. And regarding the roses and the jasmine trees, again, jasmine trees and the basil and the other stuff, they are really, really blooming, despite the desperate lack of water. Because I'm trying to find some water. I try to walk kilometers to just find some water, and really water these plants because they really mean to me everything. They really give me hope amid such barbarity, amid such incredibly harsh times. We're gonna wait for what is next. We're gonna have some hope. And please, to everyone listening to me, it's beyond what a human being can endure. It's beyond what a human being can imagine. What I see on the hospital, I frequently visit the hospital sometimes because of some friends and some other colleagues, etc., and some reports, but what I see inside the hospital is literally horrifying. A child with many facial burns, another child with multiple fractures in his chest, another woman, she's all burnt like a roasted chicken. It's not for fun, but this is what is really happening. Also, we've seen that a mother, she's broken, and her mom and her child, like 2 year old child, is playing around her. She tries, despite her pain, she tries to give him some sort of tenderness, some sort of love, despite what she is going through. So what we see, the scene and the image right now, we can't really think about it because it has gone way, way far worse than what it really is and what it really has been. So we just hope, we pray for an end. We thank you. We see hope in you once again that this will end. And we want to see free Palestine very soon and a very, very urgent end to this ongoing genocide.
Amen to that, Abubakar. And before we let you go, I just want to say, on behalf of all of us who are here and who are watching, and all the people who are writing comments, that we will never give up. As long as you don't give up, we will never give up. Just before you came on, and now we're going to go back to that topic. We're talking about the mass protests that are going to be happening in Chicago during the Democratic Party's national convention. Tens of thousands of people are going to be in the street. People are still coming out. We want that message to reach you as well, and to say to you, Abubakar, we love you. We are praying for you and your family and for everyone in Gaza to keep you safe, to end this now, to end it now without delay. We don't want to wait till Thursday. We want it to end now, and to see your beautiful face and smile and hear your voice without the sound of bombs in the background. This is what we're working for and praying for. And we hope we'll see you back soon. And maybe in the meantime, you'll send us some photos of your garden if you can.
Please.
I will try to do my best. Thank you so much. Just try to do your best. And I know you, I really, it's going to be, we have the same feelings. We share the same feelings. And, whom I really talking to. And I know the great audience behind listening to me and all of them. And I've really received myself messages talking to me that we haven't seen you for a while on the EI podcast. And I told them that I could not. It's not easy circumstances at all. Yeah. But again, this sort of love and level of love is something that pushes me to continue despite the harsh circumstances. So again, and one time again, and all the time, hope and love from where Abubaker is and from Gaza, and Deir al-Balah in particular. Bye-bye. The very best.
Thank you,
Abubaker. We love you.
We love you. We'll see you soon.
I'm glad we were able to get him.
Me too. And sometimes because of the connection and we don't hear from our friends and colleagues for a day or two, we are just
we get very righteously worried.
Yeah.
Legitimately.
And what could be a more perfect reminder than Abubakar's words that the protests give, all the solidarity gives people their hope to carry on. And Hatem is still with us.
Yes, let's bring him back.
So let's bring Hatem back.
Kennedy, give me 1 second, would you please?
Hatem is an organizer. He's never not working and organizing. So
that's perfect.
Yeah, listen, that's a super, super, super important call. And not only, but I understand that Nora is also super, super, super important. But I gotta run, to be honest. I just want you to all to please plug the protest next week. Abubaker is a beautiful soul. I recognize why you love him. I think every audience member, listener of yours, and people that are watching this have fallen in love with him as well. And I think Ali specifically because he's a Brit like you. But please plug the DNC Monday at 12 noon at Union Park, Randolph, and Ashland in Chicago on the west side. Wednesday at 3:30 p.m., Thursday at 5 p.m. Coalition of March on the DNC online. And, join the tens of thousands that will be here next week because we're doing our best to help free Abubaker and the rest of our family in Gaza and in the rest of historical Palestine.
Thank you
for
Hatem.
having
we
me.
know you're
Please.
we know you're busy. Thank you so much. We'll put the URL, we'll put the website address up for the march,
Please.
and we'll have you back soon to talk about.
Inshallah.
We still have much more we want to talk to
Yeah.
you about, but you've got important work to do. So
Absolutely.
go do it. And thank you for joining us today, Hatem.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much. I
Hatem.
appreciate
See you
it. Take care.
soon.
Thank you. Thank you. We still have I think we should still talk about
I think
some
we
of the things
should.
we wanted
Yeah.
to talk about, and we'll put up it's the website is March on DNC2024.org. I'll drop this in the chat, Tamara. Oh, you beat me to it.
She's
Tamara
on
is much faster. She's on it. Yeah, and that has the times and the dates. So of course there's going to be a big turnout from Chicago and the Chicago area, the Palestinian community, this broad coalition, which is bringing together people from all communities. And I know that there are people coming from all over the country. There are people driving in and busing in. So it's going to be big. And the point is that the people at the top of the government of the United States, the people who could make the phone call to stop the bombs that Abubaker is surrounded by, are going to be in Chicago, and they're going to hear from people. And one of those people, of course, is I guess the star of the DNC show, who would be
Kamala
Harris. Nora, do you want to take us into our little
Yeah, well, Kamala, last week, I think it was a campaign rally in Detroit, and anti-genocide protesters were chanting, "Kamala, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide." And we have a clip of how she responded. Let's go to that.
Donald Trump intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations. He intends to cut Social Security and Medicare. He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
Right. I mean, just the, that rhetoric of like, that liberals are espousing now, that, Kamala is better for Palestinians than Donald Trump. And if you criticize her, what do you want? Donald Trump to win? He's going to erase Gaza. But what is happening now? Who are the people in power now? Kamala Harris has power now that she could use to stop the genocide now. I mean, it's kind of this, I don't know, it makes you dizzy. And, this brings us to a broader question. Since Joe Biden pulled out of the race and Harris became the presumptive nominee, there's been a softening toward the Democratic Party among some on the so-called self-described progressive left. Some Democratic Party surrogates are talking about how she's supposedly shown more empathy toward Palestinians, as though that is a material that has any material impact. Or they underline how she didn't preside over the Senate when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke a few weeks ago. as though that was an act of defiance or, something. She did meet with Netanyahu later on, and her spokespersons have reaffirmed her commitment to arming Israel. Of course, they said that they're not going anywhere near an arms embargo. Ali, how do you and this was what we were going to ask Hatem, but Ali, how do you react when you hear claims that Harris is this, lesser evil when it comes to this genocide?
Oh, you don't want to hear how I react, but
it's rhetorical at this point.
Right. But
Yeah.
I mean, look, that video, I mean, it's there are other videos we didn't show, but there are videos taken from the back of the crowd where you can hear clearly what they're chanting, which is against genocide. And her response is that if you oppose genocide, you support Donald Trump. I mean, it is perverse.
Yeah.
It's just disgusting. And what they're trying to do, the Democratic Party and Democratic leadership, is not treat this as the most urgent moral and humanitarian issue of our time, one in which the United States is absolutely on the wrong side, but just to triangulate it. I mean, so they, by that, it means like, oh, well, so it's all these fine calculations. So, well, she didn't preside over the Senate when Netanyahu spoke, so that's supposed to please the people who support Palestine. But she did meet with Netanyahu privately, so that's supposed to please Israel and its lobby. And then why did she come out, or her spokesperson, her national security spokesperson, come out and reaffirm her support for arming Israel? Is because the news came out after that rally in Detroit, where we just saw the video, which was last week, that there were news reports that she had met with members of this of Uncommitted, the Uncommitted movement, which is the movement which encouraged people to leave their ballots blank or not to vote for Joe Biden in the very few Democratic primaries that actually happened before the Democratic Party canceled them all and tried to impose Joe Biden. We all know what happened after that. And Uncommitted came out and said, oh, we met with Kamala Harris. It's not very clear if this was an organized meeting or if they just sort of met behind the scenes of the rally. They said, we met with her and that she agreed to a meeting, or her staff agreed to a meeting to talk about an arms embargo on Israel. It was after that Harris's top national security person came out and said, no arms embargo. She's absolutely committed. And I don't know if it's a mere coincidence that this was in the same week. There it is, the tweet from Phil Gordon. I'll just read it for those who are listening. The vice president has been clear she will always ensure Israel is able to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. She does not support an arms embargo on Israel. She will continue to work to protect civilians in Gaza and to uphold international law. The last sentence, of course, is just BS, because she fully supports murdering civilians in Gaza with the weapons that the Biden-Harris administration continues to ship. And they just yesterday, as if, I don't know, but I'm guessing they did this to hammer the point home. Yesterday, they announced another $20 billion weapons package for Israel, another $20 billion. And I think a few days ago, they announced $3 billion or $3.5 billion. So it's like psychological torture or warfare that they're doing. And then the other thing is, last week or a couple of days ago, I think this was on Monday, her campaign announced an outreach director to the American Jewish community. Who did she pick? She picked someone called Ilan Goldenberg, who is a longtime government apparatchik and Israel lobbyist. He worked in the Department of Defense. He worked in the Obama administration. He's one of her advisors. Israeli-born, moved to the U.S. at a younger stage. Israeli-born, spent his career supporting Israel, and he's her representative to the Jewish communities. Well, what kind of representative is that to the thousands of young American Jews who are blocking bridges in the Bay Area, or the Brooklyn Bridge, or in the whole, in the Rotunda of Congress and Grand Central State, all these mass protests we've seen organized by young Jewish people? Does he represent anything for them other than the things that are just revolting to them? But her message is to, that appointment reinforces what I believe is the anti-Semitic idea that to be Jewish, to be an American Jew, means to support Israel and its genocide. And then yesterday, and then again back to this triangulation of trying to throw crumbs at everyone, she appointed a Muslim outreach director. So this is someone to do outreach to the Arab American and Muslim community, a woman called Nasrina Barghzi, who is an Afghan American. Her family came to the United States in the 1980s as part of a refugee resettlement program. To me, it looks like it's likely that her family were involved in the US-backed Mujahideen and they were brought to that's the typical pattern. I don't know that for a fact, but just from the public information that is there about her. And what does that mean? We're supposed to think, oh, wonderful, there's a brown lady who's Muslim, who's from an Afghan background, nothing to do with Palestine. And that's supposed to make people feel good about Kamala Harris's support for the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So again, it's this identity politics, this tokenism, this virtue signaling, like, oh, well, so they're murdering babies in Gaza and starving people. But look, we have this Afghan American woman who's in the Kamala campaign. The idea of brown faces in high places or black faces in high places as a substitute for end the genocide. Stop the genocide. That's what we want. We don't want to see, we don't care if there's an Afghan American woman in Kamala's campaign or her administration. We want an end to the genocide. That's what that's what all this boils down to. Just smoke and mirrors and signaling. And sadly, people are buying it.
People are buying it wholesale. Absolutely. No, I mean the level of vitriol that American liberals, white liberals particularly, have for the student protesters in this country, for activists, like Hatem, for people who are pointing out the hypocrisies of the Democratic Party and the Democratic elite, pointing out the revulsion at this virtue signaling and these attempts to weaponize identity as a cudgel to shut people up and to continue the policies that we've been seeing the last 10 months. It's stunning, and it's also not surprising when we look at how this country works and how we're following the money and following the power. I'm excited to see what's going to happen at the DNC and if they'll even listen, because that's the point.
They're feeling the pressure, but they're still sending, that's the bottom line. But, as Abubaker told us, and as I think we can never say enough, it's, we have to keep up the pressure. We can't give up. People in Gaza aren't giving up, and we just have to keep up the pressure in every way we can. And don't yield to them. Don't allow them to silence us. They're telling us, they keep saying, oh, well, if Kamala loses, Trump will do all these terrible things. Their worst fantasy of Donald Trump is still not anywhere close to this Democratic Party genocide in Gaza. The Biden-Harris genocide in Gaza is the worst thing possible. It's the worst thing possible. And don't tell me, I'm here in the United States. I don't like Donald Trump. In in an ideal world, in a world that was 0.5% ideal, he wouldn't be president. But nothing Donald Trump is going to do to Americans is going to be nearly as bad as what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing to Palestinians right now and have been doing. And again, I don't tell people how to vote. I'm just telling you my opinion, my views, which is that in any situation, if these people constantly are rewarded, if they can win and win and win and win, and never pay a price for their horrific policies against Americans, against people around the world, what hope is there of any change? I mean, if the Democrats lose, we may well be in for tough times, but we're having tough times now anyway. Is there any chance that there would be introspection or some kind of change or some kind of collapse of the party and its disappearance and replaced with something better? Well, the only possibility of that is if they are punished for what they're doing. If they just win and win and win, we get to the situation now where it's like there's no bottom. Literally, genocide is not a deal breaker for them. Genocide is fine. You know, it's just another niche issue. I get told this, that, oh, you're a single issue voter. Yes, or a single issue, whatever it is. Not everyone is a voter. Not everyone who has the right to vote wants to vote. Abstention is certainly a political statement. But yeah, of course, for me, genocide is the only issue.
Shouldn't it be everyone? Yeah,
absolutely. Of course.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, well, there are things happening all over the world. But this is an American genocide. Yeah. This is the responsibility of the United States. As ugly, as brutal, as cruel, as fanatic as Israel is, they could not do this for 3 days without the backing of the United States.
That's it. And the resistance in Gaza is still taking them to task wherever they are. And with that, I think that's a good segue to bring on Jon for the resistance report.
Hello, guys.
Hi.
It's all true.
Yep.
It's all true. It's great to see Abubaker, and always good to see Hatem too. I wish we could have had him longer.
Yeah, I think
we'll definitely get him back. I mean, we were lucky, originally we were only going to get 15 minutes because he's doing back-to-back interviews, organizing. As of this morning, as he told us, the city of Chicago still hasn't issued the permits. And people around the world may not know that you have to have a permit to protest in this
the freest country in the world.
Yeah, but the permits are not supposed to be based on the content of the protest. But clearly there are some shenanigans going on, a lot of political pressure, and those permits need to be issued because, delaying them when you have to set up the infrastructure, as Hatem said, for tens of thousands of people. You have to make sure there's water and sound systems and toilets and everything. You can't delay that till 1 day before because that effectively is a form of censorship, and we're still dealing with that now.
Yeah, and people have to be in the streets because that's the key. All of this election stuff of which terrible genocidaire you're going to vote for is nonsense. People need to be in the streets. We have seen the face of the enemy as clear as it's ever going to be given to us, and it's not a ballot box issue. It's in the streets issue. So it was great to hear from Hatem because that is a crucial cog in ending this.
Yeah.
Indeed. All right. Well, Jon, it's been another busy week for you and the fighters. Let's get into the report.
Let's do it. And just as I always begin these reports by saying, this is everything you're going to see is from this past week alone since you last saw me. And again, we're going to start in the south. Rafah is still the main battle space now into the 4th month here. You could see this map here of Gaza. We talked a lot about the massacres that were happening in the north. because the bombing raids and the shelling and the massacres don't match to the battlefields. As we know, the battlefields are cleared, and the fighters don't fight among people. So when people are being massacred in the schools in Gaza City, that is not a battlefield. What I'm going to cover for the next half an hour, 40 minutes is going to be the battlefield. And we're going to start in Rafah. There's a few maps here that I want to show. Maybe map X here. My numbering's a little confusing today, but just to give you an idea, this is the United Nations UNISAT, the United Nations satellite agency. Those red dots are airstrikes and destroyed buildings throughout Gaza. And we've been showing these maps. I try to bring them in every couple months to just show how disgusting and all-encompassing this genocide is, and the destruction level in Gaza. We're talking about a 361 square kilometer area that has 156,400 buildings destroyed, 88% of the industrial and business facilities destroyed, more than 400,000 housing units, and then 70% of Gaza has been laid to waste, with 82,000 tons of bombs, which is 5 times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, which was just the anniversary of it in this past week. So in a tiny, closed off, besieged area, 82,000 tons of bombs. It's just criminal. We know it's criminal, but when you look at a map like that, especially when you look at the north, and also to take into consideration the agricultural land has all been destroyed on the buffer zones as well. And those red concentrations are a heat map, so they're not individual strikes. There's many strikes in those dots. So let's take a look at map B, because we're going to zoom in and focus on Rafah to start here. And again, this map holds up now. We're into the 4th month of this map holding up, because the main battle space is still along the Philadelphia corridor. This is the strategic corridor that Israel is fixing to hold on to, and has been the focus of their operations in Rafah. And the main fighting, there was an operation in the east of Rafah, but the main battle space is in Tel Sultan, which is on the western edge of Rafah that you see there, and right along the corridor. And the thing about the Philadelphia corridor, which is different than the Netzarim corridor, is that it's densely populated along the Philadelphia corridor. And this is something that this is a Zionist dream, to have this corridor be expanded. And that used to be, their goal was 400 meters. The Zionist dream was 800 meters. And now what we're looking at is well above a kilometer wide. And you can see on this next map tomorrow, if we do map Y here, you can see the concentrations of the airstrikes along the border and the demolitions. Not all airstrikes. They're wiring up buildings and blowing them up. But you can see clearly what's happening. That yellow line is the border with Egypt. Down in the bottom third there, where you see that space, that's the Rafah crossing that's been closed. No patients, virtually nobody has left. There's been a couple of delegations of cancer patients that got out in small numbers, but there's tens of thousands of people needing medical care that are not getting out that border crossing. And you can see the way that the Philadelphia corridor is being constructed by Israel using this satellite map. You can see what's happening on the ground. And then if we just do Z here tomorrow, you can see just a quick one before and after, because you just want to know what it looks like. This is what it looks like when you just erase neighborhoods, entirely erase neighborhoods. And that's what they've done with the Philadelphia corridor and with this area of Rafah. Israel said Rafah invasion was going to be a few weeks. We're now halfway into the 4th month. And so, again, the resistance making the job of the Israeli genocide project much more difficult, and continuing to fight on. So let's look at number 1 here. This is we have a number of complex ambushes this week. This is the George Street 4-stage ambush. It's dedicated to the name of Abed Ismail Haniyeh, the prime minister and leader of Hamas Politburo. The commander talks about the 4 elements of the ambush here. And again, the commander's able to communicate. Rafah, again, hand delivering weapons here, hand delivering a shock device to the back door of a Namr troop carrier. Rafah's been the lead in this type of delivery, the hand-delivered weapons. They're doing it regularly to great effect, and you can see them do it here. This guy in his bare feet just busts out, drops it in the exact spot that it's supposed to be, and hits the Namr troop carrier here in this spot, just as the commander said. Now, the commander said the reinforcements would come through this predictable route after that strike, and there he is, just like they planned. One of the reasons, so this is a Yasin 105 strike from an elevated firing position down onto a Merkava tank. And one of the reasons why the routes are predictable is because of intelligence and reconnaissance by the fighters, but also because of the destruction by Israel that makes routes blocked by rubble. So there's a barrel bomb. That's stage 3. The tank proceeds right into the barrel bomb. The barrel bomb is a bomb that's filled with TNT from unexploded ordnance, which is also going to be a theme of this week. And we have a second Namr here. You can tell the difference. The screen, the pergola, the cope cage, the drone cage on the top is bent. You see different markings on the tail. And in the field reports, they talked about 2 Namrs, and that's also the next day when that one goes off. So yeah, let's just look at this one more time. You see a detailed map on the ground, on the table there. You see the fighters reading a book about the liberation of Palestine, using reflections from the Surat Al-Isra. Fighters reading books about liberation on the table there, again, dedicated to Haniyeh, which has been a theme for the last 2 weeks since his assassination. This fighter in bare feet, navigating out, putting the charge exactly where it's supposed to be, executing his operation precisely just as the briefing from the commander showed. And we saw all of them put their hands in, because there's 3 elements of this ambush. This is a guerrilla action device is what you're seeing here. An improved guerrilla action device, stronger than the ones we've seen before, because they're being made out of TNT from the unexploded ordnance. And then the tank comes just exactly like they said it would, and he's right in position to be hit by a Yasin, which is also built by the TNT. The charge in the Yasin is recharged by unexploded ordnance. This tank rolls over it's called a barrel bomb for the Palestinians. In Iraq and Afghanistan, they were called roadside bombs. These are devastating bombs that hit the undercarriage of the tank hull, and they could be as big as you could pack them. And then the next morning, this is the next day, this second Namr comes out in the exact spot that the first one did. So presumably these fighters are reaching these spots by tunnel, and hitting these vehicles one after another. So just really an important layered operation in Rafah. We're still seeing command and control. Obviously, we saw the commander, you saw drone footage map being used for that operation. So those 3 groups all executed their task as planned. Let's go to number 2. This is also, this is in Tel Sultan. This is the scene that you have gotten used to throughout this war. Within spitting distance of a tank, you get a Yasin strike that looks like it gets right in the turret gap there. That's what he's aiming for, at least. And no trophy active protection system going off on this round. It's far too close. The radar can't read through the destroyed buildings. But look at that. It's just military vandalism. There's no purpose to destroying a building that way. It gives fighters cover. All you're doing is making it impossible for humans to live there. You're not making it harder for the fighters. And this is part of an operation that there was in the field reports. This is one of 4 Merkava tanks that was hit in Tel Sultan in this area, in this day of operations. There's 25 operations in Rafah since you last saw me. This is one of them. Let's do number 3, because this is interesting. We're seeing an M113. These are remote controlled armored personnel carriers that have been repurposed and are carrying munitions. So they're unmanned, driven by remote control. And you see here the fighter disables it with the shot to the top where its driving mechanism is, disables the vehicle from the top. And now these vehicles carry, they hump. They're like donkeys. They carry explosives back and forth. They're using them to shuttle. And then we see another guy in Rafah doing the hand delivered. These guys are just too much. He just runs right out there in his sandals, slips it in the exact spot that they want, and then watch this detonation here, because it's obviously packed with explosives. So they're shuttling mines. And I don't think the cameraman was expecting that level of blast, because you don't know what's in them. You don't know if it's full of mines, which that clearly was. Some of them are used for mobile mortar units. And this is something that's new to this war. We haven't seen this be used before. And we saw them earlier in the war, and we wondered if it meant that the Israelis were sending in these poorly armored vehicles that had been destroyed spectacularly in the past. But these are remote controlled, and we've seen some of them burning, destroyed a number of them. But these M113s are automatic, and this is something that the Israelis have. This is a new thing for this war. They also have some automatic D9 bulldozers. And look at this guy just coming out. That's a long distance to cover when there's drones above you, and he makes it back just in time for this pretty spectacular blast. So destroying M113s that are remote controlled. So another successful operation in Rafah. Let's do number 4 here tomorrow. This is a thermobaric warhead against a troop position, also in Tel Sultan. So we're going to see the classic soldiers in a window, identifying themselves clearly there with their triangles. And then we don't see the weapon fired, but you can tell by the blast that it's the Qassam-built tandem charge thermobaric warhead that's built by Qassam, which has an initial charge that can pump through the wall. And then the second charge is a fuel-air explosion that fills the room with fire in an instant. So it's a very deadly weapon that's being used to great effect throughout the war. And again, we're seeing medevacs here. This one is an egregious one. You can almost basically see what color the pilot's eyes are, but they don't touch them. They have a principle of not attacking. In the Quran, the Prophet said, "Do not attack a wounded person." I have questions about whether that applies to these helicopters. But I'll take that up with the appropriate sources at the time, because the time that it's relevant, because I don't think these helicopters are not. This is not a vanquished opponent, which is, I think, that what the Prophet is talking about is when you defeat an army, that you don't attack the wounded people when they're defeated. But this is ongoing battle. That helicopter pilot is part of a battle that is continuing. And I know I get a lot of comments from people saying, why do they not? Because that footage right there is just clearly within range of an Al-Ghul. That's in range of lesser guns than an Al-Ghul. And they don't touch them. They're on principle, no matter how. This was on Saturday after the massacre. That Nora described in the school massacre, and it's just the Zen-like patience of not, betraying your principles, these fighters' principles, and they're doing it. They're sticking to it, even though I think that's the closest helicopter that we've seen. So, yeah. Number 5 tomorrow. Let's go to also Tel Sultan. We got a Saraya al-Quds fighter here. You see him holding Saraya al-Quds' primary anti-tank weapon, the Tandem 85. He's got the Shawaz 3, which is a Qassam Brigade's weapon. And this is a beauty, this video, because these two guys they're gonna place this explosive, and then in the house here, these two guys are gonna debate who gets to detonate the explosives, and you're gonna watch him set it up here. So he's gonna set it up at head height. We haven't seen this actually before, because he's got a tank right outside. He's gonna aim the shape charge at the turret of the tank. But essentially, what you get here is these two guys begging and pleading with each other to set off an explosive device head high. And they both want to do it. And the one guy says, I want a tally of soldiers. I want soldiers on my tally. And he's begging him, please let me take responsibility. Let it be my responsibility. And they're debating over it. And You can go to my Twitter account to hear the audio of it, because it's just there's a whole genre of these type of communications from the fighters. The fighters want to carry out the operations, right? The other side handcuffs teenagers, puts them in military uniforms, and makes them go into houses as human shields, like the most cowardly thing that you could really conceive of. And then these guys on the other side are debating who gets to pull the pin out of a homemade weapon, shape charged weapon made of TNT that would blast all of the people in the room and kill them. And then we see here these fighters, after it, they've got a pizza here, and they say, here's a triangle to celebrate the destruction of tanks and the liberation of Palestine. And that's a shout out to last week, if you remember, the Tel El-Hawa battalion, the Tel El-Hawa battalion had those desserts after their operation. And so these fighters are talking to each other. They're communicating battalion to battalion. As we're going to see as this show goes on, they're communicating with the outside world. They're aware of their surroundings. They're not hiding in a tunnel completely separate from what's going on, as they're sort of you're told in the media that they are. They're involved in this work. They're deeply involved in the communications, fighting for their homeland. And that was just a great scene. So that's the resistance in Rafah. Moving a little bit further north in Khan Younis this week. Khan Younis, the night of the 8th and the 9th, just this past week, Thursday, Friday, the IDF reinvaded Khan Younis for the third time, clearing operation for the third time in Khan Younis, carrying out more than 30 airstrikes and chasing something like 50,000 people out in minutes out of Khan Younis, the same way they did it out of Jabalia, the same way out of 𝐓𝐿𝐴. This is the 98th Division of the IDF. This is the roving division that's moving around from place to place, attacking. They had previously attacked, they started this roving by attacking Shifa Hospital, if you remember back, where they made 3 mass graves and massacred patients at Shifa Hospital. Then they went to the Jabalia camp, to the southern Jabalia refugee camp, where we watched one of their soldiers get dragged into a tunnel that we've never heard from him again. The Israelis are claiming that they don't know who that guy is that was dragged into the tunnel. And then 𝐓𝐿𝐴, the 98th Division in 𝐓𝐿𝐴. And also the 98th Division was the one who was in Khan Younis from December till April, failing in their mission. And their commander left saying that they did not achieve their objectives, and they had to rotate a new unit into Khan Younis, because they expected Khan Younis to be a 2-month fight. And it ended up being a 6-month fight, because that's the nature of the resistance. So just to give you that on Khan Younis, this operation starts. Number 10 tomorrow. They go, as soon as they arrive, they're immediately hit by this operation. This is 𝐄𝐥𝐿. This is a improvised explosive device in a paint can that says the writing on it says place a meter and a half above the ground. It's an anti-personnel device that's going to hit personnel here. This is the Farahin ambush number 2. This is the site of the Night of Power ambush during Ramadan that chased the Israelis out of Khan Younis. So we see here the 8 triangles going for a walk, and these fighters are saying hit the yellow to detonate, and it blows up. And the Israelis this week didn't claim any casualties on this, so it's really impressive that they're able to heal. They're being carried away here on stretchers, 4 of them, 4 separate stretchers. But by the time they get back to Israel, they're all fine. There are no casualty reports. Nobody was reported killed in these operations. The Israelis only claimed 1 death in this week. So you can, again, we do it every week. You can see if they're lying or not. At least 4 of these triangles are in big trouble. And they're not claimed as injuries. This Qassam phoned into Al Jazeera after this operation and said that the 𝐄𝐥𝐿 had 750 pieces of shrapnel in it, that it was built with TNT and RDX from the 55,000 aerial bombs that have been, that's my number and the IDF number. Qassam didn't use that number. They just said it's from the TNT from inside an aerial dropped bomb from this war. It was constructed in the last couple of weeks. And just to give a sense, there's 55,000 airstrikes, aerial dropped bombs, and a 5% dud rate. So there's something like 3,000 bombs that can be used, and 50% of their weight is explosive. So if it's a 2,000-pound bomb, it's 1,000 pounds of TNT. If it's a 1,000-pound bomb, it's about 500 pounds of TNT, give or take, a little bit less than half. But enough to build all of Qassam's weapons are built with that. That's what the Yasin warhead is built with. That's what their rocket program is built with. That's what's inside the Shawad. And so they're being resupplied by all of this. These massacres are giving the resistance weapons for another generation. Really, it's an incredible amount of unexploded ordnance. So important operation here. And again, just like these banger operations, as soon as the Israelis arrive, this is minutes after they arrive on the first day. They go in on the night of the 8th and the 9th, and this is the morning of the 9th operation. So just impressive that we're seeing them still using their weapons that they prepared before the war, but we're seeing now multiple times weapons that have been prepared just in the battle that we're in right now. So that was an impressive operation. That operation also dedicated to Ismail Haniyeh. And number 11, we have 3 Al-Ghul sniper ops, and these need to be edited because they are very obviously sniper kills. So these videos are edited. That's the first one the first one was from a week and a half ago on the edge of Khan Younis. This one was from a little more than a week ago. And then this one is just from the other day. And this was a successful shot here. You're going to see in this one, take note here, when he passes him the rounds here, his spotter's going to pass him the rounds, and you're going to notice that those are Israeli rounds. We saw those before. The gray tipped means it's an armor piercing incendiary, and that's a 12.7 millimeter right there. You see it there with the gray tip. That's Israeli bullets. So we're seeing, and the fighter there has a Sarai al-Quds and a Hamas and a Qassam bandana on his arm, and that's the soldier that gets it. And the Israelis admitted to that soldier's death. He was a paratrooper in the 101st Battalion, and he was killed in a Hamas sniper attack. And the Al-Ghul blows the armbands off and sends a really wicked piece of ammunition downstream. So an Israeli getting killed by an Israeli bullet, something we've seen before. Return to sender in the strongest possible way that you could imagine return to sender. But we pause the video there. Terrific work to keep these on the air. We're making editorial decisions on these edits to keep the overall on the air, so you do miss some of the aspects of it. But let's go to the next one tomorrow. It is number 12. So this is yesterday. This is Qassam said these were M90s. I think that these are actually A120s. These are Rayad Al-Attar's rockets, 120 kilometer range, 80 kilogram warhead. These were fired at Tel Aviv, the first time that they've been fired, that Qassam has fired on Tel Aviv in a few months. And you can see it's a makeshift launcher that they've built here. And we're going to run this a couple times because there's a lot going on in that video, in that piece of paper. That's a David and Goliath allusion to have patience to make us victorious. On the paper is Naji Al-Ali's Handala, who is a Palestinian character, a refugee boy who's in political cartoons, who has his back turned witnessing world events. It's a potent symbol in Palestinian culture of resistance, and Handala will stay with his back towards the audience until the last Palestinian refugee returns to their home. There's also a Bassel al-Araj quote in there: "Live like a porcupine, fight like a flea." Bassel al-Araj is a leftist activist. He's a fighter and a writer. He's citing Mao there. So you have Qassam, again, interacting with the other political figures, revolutionary figures, not based on whose party they're in, but based on the national liberation struggle. And so there's 2 quotes from Bassel al-Araj in there. The other one is, "We will stay for as long as the za'atar and olives remain." And Basil was killed by Israeli Yamam border police death squads in 2017, and he went down fighting after a 6-month manhunt. He went down fighting, and he was found with a bunch of his writings, and his unpublished writings are in the process of being published in various ways, and we'll tell you more about that on this show as they're coming up, because they're super important works that people that you on this show are familiar with are doing excellent work on. And then this fighter, he holds before that, we might have to go one more time on this tomorrow. There's so many details. That fighter holds up the fuse of the rocket, and he says, "This is our triangle," where the other guys were holding up the triangles of their food. And they say, and on that piece of paper that you see is written a whole bunch of things. "Is my voice clear?" which is a Basil al-Araj book. "It caught fire," which is the walat from the Surah al-Quds fighter who jumped in the air, like levitated. "Oh, West Bank, yalla, let's go West Bank." So shout out to the West Bank. There's a shout out to the soul of my soul reference to that father and the grandfather and his granddaughter Reem. Wael Dadu is "It's Okay," and the triangle, Gaza under attack, Gaza Holocaust, Gaza is starving. So they're aware of all of these internet hashtags and the important parts of the war that resonated outside of the Gaza Strip. So there, can we do it one more time tomorrow? Just so I can show you what each of those pieces of paper are. So first of all, they're making their own launcher here. Their launch pads. They're making this launcher amid the invasion. This is from Khan Younis. This is a rocket being fired amid the Israeli invasion of Khan Younis. So just a real middle finger to them again. That they're able to do this, and they're using their makeshift rocket systems to do this. And so we're going to see the first, so the M90 is black. The gray rocket is the Riyad al-Attar. There's Handala and Basil al-Araj's quotes. They're showing the rockets here. Here he's saying that's the fuse that enables the rocket. And then here he is writing down on paper all of the things. "Is my voice clear?" Basil al-Araj. "It caught fire." Just the most iconic moments of this war. They're communicating with each other, with each battalion. They're communicating with the outside world. They're showing their personalities, who they are. They're showing what books they're reading. You can see the books they're always showing that they're reading. And all of these things are just messaging to the world in month 11 of their genocide. That one rocket went into the sea, as you can see there. The wooden launcher is not ideal, but the point is made by this, and that's just a remarkable video from yesterday in Khan Younis. Thanks for bearing with me there, Tamara. I wanted to get all those details in. So that's Khan Younis. Khan Younis has had 21 operations, separate operations, in the 5 days since the invasion. 5 rocket and artillery attacks, 3 IEDs, 3 sniper attacks that we just saw, and 2 drone seizures. So 25 ops in Rafah, 21 ops in Khan Younis. So 50 operations just this last week. Let's go to Gaza City with map C. Map C. This is the north that we're going to look at. And again, we're going to focus on Tel El-Hawa, because Tel El-Hawa is still being invaded from the Netzarim corridor. This has been going on now for 3 weeks. If we look at number 15 here, tomorrow we have Surah al-Quds using Gaza-made hand grenades, the MK2, which is known as the pineapple. It's a copy of a famous grenade, but these are built by Qassam and built by Surah al-Quds, built in the Gaza Strip. This program of building these hand grenades is something that goes back to the beginning of the arming. Hand grenades and rockets were the 2 founding weapon systems that Adnan al-Ghul believed that, and Salah Shahada believed, could get into the hands of all of their fighters and make their fighters. If their fighters have weapons, they're fighters. If you have thousands of fighters that don't have weapons, then they're not fighters. So the more weapons you can get, the more fighters you have, and that's the principle of the resistance. And you can see it here. It's a booby trap. He's setting it up as a booby trap in a house, and in Tel Hawa, in a booby trap building, and it's a successful operation according to the videos. But the Israelis, again, no casualties claimed. But you can see them exiting their tank here, going into the building, and it gets detonated on them. So again, Gaza-built weapons being used by Gaza's fighters. And we can go to number 16 now tomorrow. We're going to spend some time on this one too, because this is a remarkable operation. This is the Al-Bara ambush. This is a 5-stage ambush in Tel Hawa. So they're going to, first of all, we see tactical deployment of drones again, spotting the route, predicting the route that the Israelis will take once they're hit. And you can see they're marking it. The operation will begin with a thermobaric warhead you see in the upper left, and they're going to predict where the route here. And this is on the screen here. They're telling us that these fighters laid this ambush was laid in December, that you're seeing here. Now we're watching the fighters lay the wiring to the various devices. There's a Radia, there's a Shawaz, there's the Shawaz you can see. There's also a barrel bomb in the road, and there's 2 anti-personnel devices. So it begins with the TBG, the thermobaric warhead. The fighters are going to here move between the buildings, mouse holing, without going outside. The Israelis decide to have a big curtain hanging out of a building that has no other curtains, and it gets hit. And once they get hit, they panic, they call reinforcements, and here come the reinforcements. They're going to walk right into the Shawaz that we see, the explosively formed penetrator. They're going to exit their vehicle. Again, command and control, watching on closed circuit TVs. These guys have been in these positions for 8 months, as predicted by the commanders and the forces. The Israelis arrive exactly where they're expected to arrive, and they're going to be right now in the kill zone of a Yasin 105 strike that you're going to see here that follows up the Shawaz and the shock device that was set. So they're predicting the exact movements of the forces and having their 5 parts of this. Their 3 fighters have Yasin 105s for this. And you can see the commanders talking to each other and talking on a closed line to the other combat nodes. And the Yasin's going to come in here from the side. Oh, actually, that's the anti-personnel coming in from the side. So the fighters are seeing it, and then this is going to be, you can see in the background there, that's the soldiers exiting the vehicle. And then they're getting hit by a second anti-personnel round. Then they're going to get hit by a Yasin 105. Here he is, in exactly like the commander said, that they would go to protect those spots. And you can see the road. You can't drive everywhere. The routes are restricted because of Israeli destruction. And then they're going to abandon their vehicles here and run to the mosque that they believe is the safe house, the Al-Bara Mosque. And that is also hit with an anti-personnel IED. So just a remarkable operation. The fighters were in position for 8 months in their combat positions. Also great video. The videos are, the video editing improvements are remarkable to see. But just there's a couple things to say about being in your position for 8 months. That's showing you that this is not a guerrilla force. They're not running around Gaza harassing the Israelis with whatever fighters are available. The fighters are like a proper military in their positions. They don't run around from one spot to the next. They fight in their own battalions. They're merging, in some cases, battalions in areas where a fight, like in Jabalia, we saw the merging of a couple of battalions to fight. But they're not running all over Gaza harassing the army. They're waiting in their positions to defend the area in the way they know how to. And they set up these operations to so much detail that it's a whole page of things to write to try to tell you about how many things are going on and what it means. Like, look at the destruction of these buildings. It serves absolutely no purpose. You can see the Israelis still dangling out windows, getting hit by thermobaric warheads. And then the lines on that map are predictive by the Qassam forces. They're saying they know this is the route they're going to take, partly because other routes are closed, but mostly because they have intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance on these. They have closed lines communicating with spotters in various spots in the field who are watching. That's why we get multiple views of the medevac helicopters, if you're ever wondering why we see that. We see multiple views of the medevac helicopters because Qassam has spotters throughout the city. And so those spotters are taking imaging of the helicopters flying away. So that's another indication that you have communication on this closed line between all of the fighters. Still, 11 months on, in a place like Tel Al-Hawa that's been virtually wiped out, they still have the capacity to carry out these operations in the same way that they were doing it originally, like right from the first day. And that was something that's important for Qassam when they picked the date of this attack, was to have their forces be ready for the Battle of Al-Aqsa flood, that not to be fighting for 7 months and then be helpless. Defending your community for 11 months, using all different types of weapons, some that are built before, some that are built during, and fighters that are returning to their bases safely after carrying out that operation. You can see the Yasin strike from that second camera is a perfect strike. Again, no active protection system. And predicting where the Israeli forces will retreat to. And they retreat to the mosque and get hit again in that mosque. So the Al-Bara ambush by the Tel Al-Hawa crew, just really well done. Okay, number 17, this is the last one here. It's a Surah Al-Quds drone seizure. So drones have been... drones are the thing that have changed in this war. Deploying these tactical drones that the Israelis use to go inside buildings, they all carry them. This is the first time we've seen the DJI Avata. This is a drone that we've seen it in the air. We've seen it flying into houses. We've seen other drones have recorded it flying around, but that's the first one that we've seen. Surah Al-Quds dropped it. And you can see that they're dropping this by spoofing, by jamming the signals and then spoofing and then landing them on their own. And that's something that the Israelis can't defeat, because here you're going to see footage, because it's an FPV drone, first person view. So you see those guys with the goggles, they're driving the drone. So the footage on the drone that Surah Al-Quds captured shows them using the drone in a house and in their base. And that's the number one thing that has changed about this war. And the peer-to-peer military conversations have talked about the way that they deploy these drones. These drones have 19 minutes of batteries, and they send them into the house to fly around, to look in the space, to case the joint. And the Palestinians have been bringing them down. They can't scramble. Palestinian drones are in the air because the Israelis can't jam the signals, because if they jam the signals, their own drones don't work. So that's why we're seeing footage from Qassam deploying drones. When people ask sometimes, like, how do they not get shot out? How are they not? Is there no defense against these drones? And the main reason why is because Israel uses the same electromagnetic spectrum. So it harms their forces to bring down the drones. It means they can't use their drones, which are a crucial part of the way they fight house to house, because as we know, they fight house to house by sending handcuffed teenagers in uniforms or sending in these drones. They're very risk averse, they're cowardly, and that's why in many cases why the death toll in Gaza is so high, is because these fighters are fighting a cowardly war where bombing is taking the place of military on military fight. So just wanted to bring that from Surah Al-Quds. It's interesting. We've seen lots of Qassam down drones. Surah has downed a lot of drones too, but that's the first Avata that's been down. So and it's interesting to see that footage of the soldiers themselves flying it. We've seen that a few times before, but that is the resistance report for this week. That is from the Gaza Strip, from Gaza City, Tel Al-Hawa, from Khan Younis, from Rafah. And the other factions were fighting as well. There's no time for all of the mortar operations and the rocket fire, rocket artillery, but all the factions are still in the fight. They're harassing on the Netzarim corridor. And like I said, 25 qualitative operations from the Rafah brigade and 21 in 5 days by the Khan Younis brigade. So the resistance is as fierce as ever.
Wow. Good one, John. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tamara, I'm going to ask you to put up this report, which comes from the Israeli media. Actually, it's from the Israeli military, who revealed some numbers, or the Israeli government rather. I'll drop this here in the chat. That over 10,000 Israeli troops have been treated since October 7th, says the rehab department of the Defense Ministry. And they said today that 10,056 soldiers had received treatment since the beginning of the war on October 7th, as they put it. And I don't know why the article's not showing up on my screen now. Here we are. It says 35% or some 3,500 were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental disorders caused by trauma. Another 37% were suffering from physical trauma to their limbs. And it did not detail the conditions of the other 28%. And I think this is significant. It says that 68% of this 10,000 are reservists. So these are just people who, Tamara, I'm sorry, that's not the article. I put it in I gave you the wrong one. That was my mistake. I'd copied the wrong.
We'll get to that one.
Yeah, we will get to that one. Here's the correct one. I apologize. That was my mistake. I just given the wrong one. So this is the one I'm talking about. That's in the chat now, and you can see there that it's the one I'm talking about. Now, they say further down in the article they talk about. They say, so this is from the Defense Ministry's Rehabilitation Department, but further down they have the data from the IDF, from the Israeli ministry, the Israeli army, where they say that 4,310 soldiers have been wounded since October 7th. Of them, 640 were seriously wounded, 1,083 moderately wounded. So you see there's a huge gap there between the army figures and the ministry's rehab department. Now, they try to explain that, or they suggest an explanation here by saying that the rehab department deals with wounded veterans from all of Israel's security bodies, not just the Israel Defense Forces. So that would include police and paramilitary forces and the Yamam and so on, I assume. But there is no way that you've had only 4,300 soldiers injured, and then the other 6,000 are made up of police and paramilitary and so on. So even within this article, there is this bizarre discrepancy. I guess we can take away from it that they are suffering very severe casualties and serious casualties, because you don't go to the rehabilitation department for, just put a bandage on it and take some aspirin and go home. These are people who need long-term treatment and support. So I just wanted to put that out there, and John, see what you make of this.
Yeah, the numbers never add up. We talked about it a little bit last week as well. The numbers never add up. The numbers, even the IDF's internal numbers don't add up. And then this rehab department, the rehab division is interestingly the only place where you get these numbers. So they're getting through the censor, and I think that that's because they need funding, right? They need funding from the government. The defense ministry needs funding for this massive influx of patients coming into the rehab department. So that's getting through the censor, whereas the other stuff is in the hospitals is being blocked, and we know that back from as far back as December, when Haaretz tried to write a story about how many people had actually been wounded, and they went to each hospital, and each hospital has an IDF soldier at the gate of the hospital, at the information point of the hospital, controlling all information coming out of the hospital. Because Haaretz reported on the 10th of December that there was 10,548 soldiers who were wounded and admitted to the hospital between October 7th and December 10th, right? So that number, and now the number just doesn't change from then. Even though the fighting that was at the highest peak of fighting, but we know over the last months that it's ramped back up. But even on the IDF's page, they don't, like, just watching my report, just that, how many casualties were in there? They're not reported. The deaths are not reported. Something is going on, and people think that it's a small country and there's no way they can lie. They're clearly lying. They're clearly lying. They're hiding their casualties. They're just, to what degree? We don't know, but there's lots of anecdotal evidence that it's a big problem. There's a campaign in Israel to deal with the sidewalks, because Israelis park their cars all over the sidewalks, and there's so many people in wheelchairs now that they need to have to take into consideration accessibility in their urban planning. There's a lot of very serious injuries. Those blast injuries are, they take limbs. So yeah, the rehab department is people learning how to walk without legs. And so there's a significant number of those. I don't know when the point in this battle is going to be, when they do come clean about this. They're clearly lying about their casualties. There's nothing adds up. Not even their own internal numbers add up. The IDF's numbers don't add up. But yeah, they lied about everything else too. So
yeah, why wouldn't they keep that streak going?
But it's just it's. I see how you do it for morale, but you're hiding your soldiers that fought, and even from your own point of view, you should. From your own point of view, you should be proud of your own people fighting,
right,
and not
right, just on an objective
level.
This
is a country that has a policy of shooting its soldiers in the back if they get captured. So
or leaving them in Gaza and not negotiating over them because because a single politician wants to stay in office or whatever it is, like this, they're undoing their country before our eyes in many different ways.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. To treat your soldiers like they should be murdered, to make Hannibal a verb, like that they Hannibal each other. And then when you get captured, they leave you behind. The number one principle of an army should be no one left behind. I mean, that's what it is if you're on a camping trip with your friends, like, let alone if you're in an army fighting a war. You don't leave them on the battlefield, and Israel leaves their people on the battlefield.
Yeah, or just drone strikes them so that they can't be captured. Well, let's go to that story that came up first, the investigation of Israel's, and again, this is not a new tactic, but it's just kind of the latest in decades-long practices of using Palestinians as human shields. What does this investigation reveal that we haven't reported on already, or that maybe sheds light on something new?
Well, I mean, what it tells us, and there's the headline for those who are listening. This is from Haaretz. And the headline is, Israeli army uses Palestinian civilians to inspect potentially booby-trapped tunnels in Gaza. And I'll just read the first couple of sentences just to give a flavor of and it says, at first, it's hard to recognize them. They're usually wearing Israeli army uniforms. Many of them are in their 20s, and they're always with Israeli soldiers of various ranks. But if you look more closely, you see that most of them are wearing sneakers, not army boots, and their hands are cuffed behind their backs, and their faces are full of fear. The soldiers call each of them a shawish, and it's not an obscure Arabic word, but they say an obscure Arabic word of Turkish origin meaning sergeant. It just means sergeant in Arabic, and from Turkish chavush. Random Palestinians have been used by Israeli army units in the Gaza Strip for one purpose: to serve as human shields for soldiers during operations. Our lives are more important than their lives, soldiers were told. The thinking is that it's better for the Israeli soldiers to remain alive and for the shawishim, using the Hebrew plural, to be the ones blown up by an explosive device. And they're using children as well. I mean, you know, that they've done that. I mean, the thing is, this isn't new. We saw this. They did this with children in the 2014 war. They do it in the West Bank. They actually had, the Israeli army has something called the neighbor procedure. We've heard of the Hannibal Directive. We've heard of the pressure cooker procedure. These are all like depraved Israeli army practices that are codified as part of their doctrine. And you have the neighbor procedure, which is where if they're doing a raid in a West Bank village, they kidnap a Palestinian from maybe the house next door and march them at gunpoint to knock on the door or to check on the house, literally using them as human shields. So this isn't new, but what we're seeing is sort of the scale and systematization, and this being this being done on a mass scale in Gaza that we're not seeing reported at all in U.S. media. And the Haaretz, this is just horrifying, this paragraph from the Haaretz article. They say there is also evidence that in some cases minors, in other words children, or the elderly are used. Quote, there were times when really old people were made to go into houses, one combat soldier said. If the Palestinian knows Hebrew, that's an advantage for the IDF. When Gazans are used in buildings and tunnels, they need to report to the force outside. As one soldier put it, Palestinians are told, do one mission of a tunnel shaft and you're free. So just the depravity, the criminality, the cowardice, that these so-called soldiers are not willing to go down a tunnel shaft or into a house that they think could be booby-trapped, but they're willing to kidnap a child or an elderly person and send them in as a human shield. It is just depraved beyond words, on top of so much depravity from the rape that we're seeing at Sideteman and other torture camps and concentration camps. Now this. But I just wanted to contrast that with, if we put up that tweet from the German ambassador in Tel Aviv, which is...
Who finally blocked you this week.
Yeah, he did block me. I mean, we won't go into... This is Stefan Seibert, the German ambassador in Tel Aviv, the longtime spokesperson for Angela Merkel, the previous chancellor of Germany. And also he was himself a TV journalist for years. So he's very self-promoting and very active on social media. But here, this was after the Tabi'in school massacre. And he says terrible scenes around the school compound in Gaza. The IDF makes the case that they targeted Hamas terrorists, indeed known to hide in schools. So here he is, like, pretending to express concern about the civilians murdered in this horrifying massacre. But what he's really doing is putting forward a disgusting Israeli lie that Hamas terrorists hide among civilians, when we know that they don't need to hide in schools and hospitals, because they have an underground city that is so dense and so complex that the Israelis haven't been able to to penetrate it at all, except on the very margins. And we see in the videos that John shows us every week that they're digging tunnels to come up wherever they want to in Gaza, in the middle of the Netzarim corridor, right behind Israeli lines, or launching those missiles that hit Tel Aviv or the Tel Aviv area yesterday. Those missiles were launched from an area where there were many Israeli armored vehicles, tanks deployed. So they move underground, and they can move where they want to. So just to contrast the fact that it's in the Israeli press. It's not coming from Ali Abunimah and the Electronic Intifada. It's coming from Haaretz. We use human shields. We use elderly Palestinians as human shields. We use children as human shields. Why? Because their lives don't matter. Our lives are more important. And yet, this disgusting, vile Goyal propaganda from the German government to blame Palestinians from their deaths. And just to be fair to Herr Seibert, it's not just the German government, because we've seen similar talking points from all the European governments, and of course, the king of them all, the United States, and all our politicians, including Democratic Party politicians, to go back to our earlier discussion, who continue to repeat this trope of human shields, when there's no evidence for it. There's never been evidence for it. It's depraved. Palestinians do not do that. They risk their lives to protect their children and their elderly and their families and their communities. They don't sacrifice them in the way the Israelis do. So I just thought that could not pass without comment.
Yeah, just one quick thing on that. The 2002 Jenin, the attack on Jenin, there was an ambush in what's called the bathtub in the Jenin camp, and it was the neighbor procedure being used on a teenager, and the teenager lured them into an alley, and then he deked off down the alley, and they went to go get him, and bam, they got hit, and 7 of them were killed in an ambush from a 13-year-old luring them into an alley. But yeah, we've seen this all over. They tie kids on the roof of Jeeps. Like that, it's the most extraordinary cowardice.
They just did that to a young man, a couple weeks ago in Ramallah. Yeah, it is. It's disgusting.
And in 700 plus videos that have been released in this war by the resistance, we've seen 0 civilians. So, and it's not even like you think that there might be, there's just nothing, because the battle space has been cleared out. That's one of the interesting aspects of this war, is that Israel is attempting to evade war crimes trials by telling certain areas to evacuate. And when they tell those areas to evacuate, they're telegraphing where the battle is going to be, and the civilians leave and the fighters go. The fighters go into that battle space and they fight. And they told us that a long time ago. I remember showing that on this show, like before the new year, the fighters saying like, they say we hide behind you. There's no people anywhere around here. Our families have moved. It's dark. It's just unbelievable cowardice that I hope hangs over the head of these soldiers for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Well,
should we talk about the ceasefire?
We should. Yeah. The yet again, there is a much anticipated but room to be cynical about ceasefire talks that are supposed to happen tomorrow, the 15th. Reuters carried an exclusive story yesterday, headlined "Exclusive: Only Gaza ceasefire will delay retaliation, say Iranian officials."
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to just say about this, because I've been trying to follow it closely and figure out what's going on, and maybe you guys can help me with this. But yeah, we have that headline from Reuters that we can put up, And this exclusive story came out. Actually, it's the first.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And so basically, you can see the headline there for those who are listening. Only Gaza ceasefire will delay retaliation, say Iranian officials. And it says only a ceasefire deal in Gaza stemming from hoped-for talks this week would hold Iran back from direct retaliation against Israel for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh on its soil, 3 senior Iranian officials said. One of the sources, a senior Iranian security official, said Iran, along with allies such as Hizballah, would launch a direct attack if the Gaza talks fail or if it perceives Israel as dragging out negotiations. The sources did not say how long Iran would allow for talks to progress before responding. And then after that report came out, a few hours later, President Biden was asked if he expected Iran to refrain from retaliating against Israel for the brazen murder of Ismail Haniyeh if a ceasefire deal was reached, and he replied, yes. So that suggested, and that raised quite a lot of hope that maybe something was being worked out behind the scenes where Iran would hold off from its retaliatory strike if there were an end to this genocide. But then today, what we see is another story from Reuters, which is from this morning with the headline, Hamas to stay out of Gaza truce talks, Iran considers Israel attack. And it says, Hamas said on Wednesday, so reiterating today, it would not take part in a new round of Gaza ceasefire talks slated for Thursday in Qatar, dimming hopes for a negotiated truce that Iranian sources say could hold back an Iranian attack. And it says also the U.S. had said it expects indirect talks to go ahead as planned in Qatar on Thursday, and that a ceasefire agreement was still possible. However, Axios reported that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had postponed a trip to the Middle East that had been expected to begin on Tuesday. But earlier today also, Israeli media reporting that Israel is sending a high-level delegation made up of the Mossad chief David Barnea, Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar, and someone from the general from the military, and that CIA chief, obviously the U.S. intelligence agency, William Burns, is also going to be in Doha. So what are they going to do there if Hamas doesn't show up, or will Hamas show up? Well, the Hamas position is very clear. They say we already agreed to President Biden's proposal, which he said was an Israeli proposal. When was that? Back in May or June, or and then repeatedly. So give us a call when you're ready to implement what everyone already agreed to.
Yeah.
What they want to avoid is this Osloization, let's say, of the ceasefire negotiations, where they just drag on and on and on and on from Cairo to Rome to Doha to I don't know where, while Israel continues to murder people and escalate its massacres. And
and change the terms, right? Israel's changing the terms that each of these.
Yeah, constantly changing the terms, moving the goalposts. And then, but what I want to just focus on, what I was really looking at, thinking about this morning is this pressure? I mean, it seems that Iran is playing strategically or tactically a very clever game here, because there are signs that the pressure from Iran and Hezbollah is concentrating some minds. We heard President Biden link the Gaza ceasefire to the question of retaliation. Also, this morning, we have a press conference by the US, UK, and German ambassador, friend of the show, Stefan Seibert, joke, of course, held a press conference in Tel Aviv today. And according to Haaretz, you see that on the screen, they emphasized that for for their respective countries, their top priorities at the summit are reaching a deal to return the hostages and to prevent further escalation between Israel, Iran, and Hezbollah. And I think it's that latter point that actually concerns them the most, because if they really cared about the hostages, I mean, these ambassadors are constantly showing up at press conferences with photos of the Israeli captives behind them, but they don't care because their governments continue to support this genocide. What they really care about is preventing the Iranian retaliation, because I think there is real fear that that retaliation could really expose the extent of Israel's vulnerability and weakness, and that would be a strategic catastrophe for Israel. So all of a sudden, all this urgency now to putting all this weight and these hopes on this summit in Doha, which we don't even know if Hamas is going to show up. And before this, there was a statement by the respective national leaders. We can put that up. You can see here the statement from British Prime Minister. It's the one before that. That's the one from Chancellor Scholz. But let me see if I can find it. It's I wonder if that's again my fault. I put the wrong thing in. But there was a statement from Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, Emmanuel Macron, and Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, saying similar to what the ambassadors had said. But then that tweet, let's put that tweet back up from Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, the one that we just had on, where he says, I'll read it for those who are listening: the spiral of violence in the Middle East must be broken now. Any alternative entails unforeseen risk for the countries in the region and their people. In my phone call with the Iranian president, I urged everything be done to avoid military escalation. So you can see they're even willing to plead with Iran directly. While at the same time, they're constantly
spiral of violence, like it's a natural phenomenon.
Well, they never condemn. They never condemn Israel for its escalation, for murdering Ismail Haniyeh, for bombing Beirut and murdering Fuad Shukr from Hizballah. It's really such brazen hypocrisy while they continue to arm and shield Israel. And they all know, and this is the point I want to get to.
And there's the statement.
That it is Israel, and specifically Benjamin Netanyahu, who is blocking a deal. And here's what is really amazing. Even Netanyahu's own defense minister is willing to say it, while American and European and other leaders are not. And over the last few days, there has been a major public spat between Netanyahu and the defense minister, Yoav Gallant. First, Gallant said publicly that Israel is the side blocking a deal, which is incredible for him to say that. And everyone in Israel understands that when he says Israel is blocking a deal, he means Netanyahu personally is blocking a deal. Then Gallant ridiculed the notion of absolute victory, and we can put up that headline from the Times of Israel, calling it gibberish, and Netanyahu hit back by calling him anti-Israel. The defense minister of Israel,
he's calling him Hamas. Yeah,
the defense. I mean, just consider the absurdity of
they
this.
haven't been in the same room in months.
No.
Well, right. It's just incredible. But the defense minister of Israel is being called anti-Israel by the prime minister of Israel. We have to take our laughs where we can. But the important thing here is that Gallant, who is the chief of the military, he's the defense minister, is saying there is no such thing as absolute victory. And this is incredible, given that Gallant is one of the most belligerent, hardline and genocidal Israeli leaders. He is the one who on October 9th announced the total siege on Gaza, cutting off food and water to 2.3 million people that he called human animals. Of course, he's still completely genocidal, but he's running up against the hard reality that we are seeing, that Jon is showing us in the resistance reports, that Israel cannot defeat the resistance. And he's not just talking about Gaza, he's also referring to Hizballah in Lebanon. And what you can see there on the screen is a quote from the same Times of Israel article, recalling that Gallant was also one of the most belligerent towards Lebanon. Early in this genocide, he supported a preemptive Israeli war against Lebanon. But let's look at what he says now, and you can see it there. According to quotes leaked to Hebrew media, this is from the Times of Israel. According to quotes leaked to Hebrew media, I should just say that his comments were in a closed briefing to members of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. And now the Times of Israel tells us that according to quotes to leaked Hebrew media, Likud MKs, members of the Knesset, clashed with Gallant, asking him why Israel had not launched a war in Lebanon after 10 months of Hezbollah attacks in the north. Quote, the conditions today for a Lebanon war are the opposite of what they were at the beginning of the war, Gallant told the lawmakers, explaining that he had supported a preemptive attack at the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war in October, but has since changed his mind due to the evolving situation. Well, what is that evolving situation? It's that the Israeli military has been destroyed in Gaza, and it is being destroyed on the northern front with Lebanon. And I want to hear what Jon has to say, and Jon and Nora have to say about this, but I just want to go back for a second to those European and, of course, American leaders who continue to blame Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. Here's Iran actually saying we will forego our right to retaliate if there's a ceasefire, that we are more interested in ending the genocide and bringing a ceasefire than we are in exercising our right to retaliation, and most importantly, restoring deterrence. We will forego that for a ceasefire, and yet they are the ones being accused of escalation, belligerence, violence, extremism. And again, now we have a second tweet. I sure hope I've got all these in the right order. I apologize for the mistakes I made today. They are entirely mine. No, this is actually the tweet. I'll drop it in the chat from Olaf Scholz. This is live TV, guys. This is how it is.
That's a second Olaf Scholz, I think.
Here we go. Yes, this is it. So this was on August 11th. He says, we condemn the threats from Iran, Hezbollah, and others against Israel. I spoke to Netanyahu on the phone today. The destructive spiral of retaliation must be broken. It's time for an agreement to release this hostages and ceasefire. So he's condemning Iran, the victim of Israeli aggression, and Hezbollah, the victim of Israeli aggression in Beirut. And, you know, it's just breathtaking. And I just, again, wanted to point out who is really looking for de-escalation and ceasefire. It's Iran, it's Hezbollah, it's Hamas, it's all the groups and the countries that are demonized. It's Yemen who is saying we want to stop the genocide. We want nothing more than to stop the genocide. So, you know, but I want to hear what you guys think about the particularly the idea that Israel can no longer. Yoav Gallant say, "Yeah, I was for a war against Lebanon, but we can't do it now." Is that what he's saying?
He's reading the facts on the ground, right? And Jon, you can fit it into your resistance.
In Foreign Affairs about how Netanyahu had to lock Gallant out of the building to try to delay him from coming in because they're ready for a war with Hezbollah, right? In October, they were ready for a war with Hezbollah. They didn't pay attention to Qassam. They paid 10 times more attention to Hezbollah, and they believed that they were ready and that would be the moment to strike. And Netanyahu basically blocked him, almost physically locked him out of the building. It's in Foreign Affairs. Aluf Ben, who used to be the diplomatic correspondent for Haaretz, wrote in it. So that's interesting. And then, now they're just been degraded so badly that there's clearly no way that they can fight an open war in Lebanon. But there's also no way their students are going back to school in the north. Those northern communities are not going to be repopulated. So it's a tough one. And on the ceasefire, the things I will say about the ceasefire is that Hamas is right. In Rome at the end of last month, the Mossad director arrived in Rome with a one-page memorandum that changed key factors that were already agreed upon previously, that were ones that Qassam is not going to step back from. They were the return to the north. They changed the conditions on the return to the north, which is a core principle of the ceasefire for Qassam. They added a checkpoint. In the previous meeting in May, there would be no checkpoint going back to the north. They were just going to go unarmed back to the north, but they weren't going to be put through, through a sieve where every person is shaken down. And the key is that Israel brought on that memorandum that they're staying in the Philadelphia corridor. They're staying in the Netzarim corridor. They weren't, the May agreement was that they were moving to the eastern edge, to the buffer zone. They weren't going to be in those populated areas. And now the IDF is saying, we're staying in the Philadelphia corridor for 2 years because our work there is not done. And so they just don't care about getting their people back. And so they're
in this hubris to ask if Israel will still exist in 2 years at this rate.
That's the thing.
I've been not doing any predictions, but
Yeah.
they're pulling apart the core elements that make them a state, right?
Yeah.
They're an army and they're supposed to be able to protect their people. And that is, they're such an aggressive settler state that is a requirement. And nobody believes in the army. Nobody believes that people could be protected. Nobody believes that there's an agreement in the north where without fighting, that Hezbollah will move its Radwan units up to north of the Litani River. People don't believe that. So the fact that there's no ceasefire in Gaza has this knock-on impact of all of these other things for Israel that are slowly pulling the state apart. The buffer zones are inside Israel. And
literally nowhere is safe from the perspective of Israelis, because, as you point out, the buffer zones in the north and then the so-called Gaza envelope have displaced at least tens, but probably hundreds of thousands of people.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Now, suppose Iran were to strike. Of course, there's an element of brinksmanship here and deliberate vagueness, because we don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of estimations and assessments, but we don't know what Iran can really do. And Israel doesn't know, and the Americans don't know, and they don't know how well their air defenses will hold up, or for how long, because if Iran is able to fire wave after wave of ballistic missiles or cruise missiles, and if they expose that literally anywhere can be hit at will, it's the end of Israel, because it's
people aren't going to live in that country. And that's from Iran. Hezbollah could do the same thing. And I think we're all waiting for Hezbollah's response too, because they have the ability from much, much closer to hit very hard with precision munitions that will take core parts of the state out offline.
Yeah. And I mean, it's already kind of like the disintegration of Israeli society. I mean, its political economy is, like, as we've been reporting for months and months, Shir Hever has said this, it's already in the toilet. There was now a third agency has cut Israel's credit rating.
Fitch.
Fitch, which I asked our friend Ghassan to translate all of this into English for me. He said, Fitch is saying, after an analysis, that it has become clear that this war will cost Israel 1.5% of its entire economy forever, as in permanently, as long as Israel lasts. There's a likelihood of either cutting, 1.5% of services or taking on that much in extra debt each year. So in other words, it's expected to be a permanent economic burden. So there's no way that they can come back from this economically. And this is before the quarterly financial, GDP reports are even out. And as we've been reporting, tens of thousands of businesses are closing. Major tech companies, major tech companies are pulling out. It's becoming not just a political liability in the region and in the world, but a financial liability for
and
companies.
There was also a report in the Financial Times yesterday that reported that the UK's largest private pension fund has divested of all its Israeli assets. And the quote from the Financial Times, I put it on my Twitter feed, but I don't have it in front of me right now, was that this was I'm doing this from memory, the latest in a wave of such divestments, but they used the word wave. And of course, no pension funds are divesting from Gaza. No pension funds are divesting from, the Palestinian economy because they weren't invested in it to begin with. So the losses on the economic side are all on the Israeli front. People are asking which pension fund. Maybe Tamara, you can pull that up from my Twitter feed. That would be great. Thank you. So here it is. And if we focus in, you see the Financial Times report from yesterday. The university's superannuation scheme is and it's the biggest. It has something like 86 billion pounds, I think it was, in assets overall. And then finally on this, at least for me anyway, because I know that we want to wrap in a minute. Think about this. All the airlines canceling flights, and the Iranians haven't fired a single drone or missile yet, and all the major airlines, so all the European airlines have canceled flights now until, I think the latest was until August 21st, but then they keep adding. They say, well, and then they announce an extension of that. So think about that if you're an Israeli.
Right.
When you think about, well, what if we get to a point where I can't leave because there are no flights out of the country? It's just too unsafe for any airline to fly in. And of course, where are you going to go over land? You're not going to go to any of the neighboring countries. So basically, you reach a tipping point where people say, let's get out while we can. I mean, that's all. We're just sort of speculating, but these are all things that have to be part of the analysis of all the parties involved.
They should be. There should be at least a modicum of self-preservation happening in Zionism. When I saw that $20 billion weapons package and it said 2029, my reaction to that this morning was like, that's a long way away. A
lot can happen between now and then.
That's longer than Ilan Pape said.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll continue to wait and see. Let's head over to the website just to do a quick tour of our feature stories that we've been publishing from our writers in Gaza.
I just want to say that just a shout out to, of course, first and foremost, to our writers in Gaza. One of them we spoke to today live from Gaza, Abubaker, but so many others who we don't get to see live, but who are still very present through their work. And also a shout out to our editors who are working behind the scenes. You rarely see them on this live stream, but they are working so hard, and there are so many. We are getting a lot of testimonies from writers in Gaza, and we're doing our best. And it's simply, we feel a responsibility to publish as much as we can of high quality reportage and first person testimony because of the urgency to inform people now, but also for the historical record. So no one can say we did not know what this genocide is. And I just want to say that we're trying to let our editors, after 10 months of very intense work, to take a couple of days here and there, just for the first time in 10 months really, and just to say thank you to them, we're going to be here for the long haul. We will be here as long as it takes. We take what Abubaker said very seriously. We are going to be here for the long haul. And I just want to say once again, thank you. It's so important. We can't do this without you, all of you who are watching, all of you who read, all of you who share the work we do, who send us messages of support, far more than we're able to always respond to individually, even though I wish I could respond to everyone individually. And I know I speak for all my colleagues when I say that. It means the world to us. We feel the love, we feel the solidarity, and it keeps us going. What Abubaker said applies to us too. When we hear from him and we see how strong he is in the face of unbearable suffering, that gives us strength. And when we hear from you about what this work means to you, what this community means to you, that gives us the strength to get up each day and keep doing it. It's really important. And thank you, of course, to all of you who donate to support this work. It's really important. We can't say thank you enough. You are the fuel in the engine that keeps the Electronic Intifada and all the work we do running. And so for all of you who've made a contribution, who make monthly contributions, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And for anyone who wants to, you see there on the website, you can hit that donate now button. Also in the description of the YouTube video, if you're watching this on YouTube, there are links there with several options to donate if you want to. And if you can, and I stress this, if you can't, that's fine. We don't want your donation if it's going to put you or your family or your loved ones in a situation where you have to go without something you need. We want your support in all the other ways you can show us your support. But if you've got some money and you can donate it, that helps us to continue doing this work. And thank you from all of us.
Indeed. Thank you so much,
you.
Ali. Yeah. Thank you, of course, to Tamara behind the scenes, and to Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, who helps with writing and pre-production. Thank you so much, Maureen. And Ellie Gershom, who is helping us with the social media aspect of all of this that happens. Thank you to everyone at EI, and to both you, Jon and Ali, and we will see you next week.